Good evening and welcome to this third night of the budget hearings of the Brockton Finance Committee. If the time having arrived and a quorum being present, I open this meeting and I ask you at this time, it's Flag Day, let's stand up and salute the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
The first department is Southeastern Regional School District. Invited Assistant Superintendent of Finance, Mark Morris.
Good evening, Mr. Morris, and at this time I also welcome Brockton's representative on the board, Tony Branch.
Good evening. And we also have Gerson Montero with us. We have two representatives on our school committee.
Oh, Gerson's here too.
Gerson
forgive me, Gerson. Gerson Montero as well, both of Brockton's representatives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have the distinct pleasure tonight of being here to present our FY24 school budget. I'd like to thank you for having me. At any time you have any questions, please feel free. I'll try to keep it brief, and at the end, if there are any questions, I'll take those as well.
Okay.
So just a little bit about Southeastern. We have 1,637 students for the FY24 school year. 1,004 students are from the city of Brockton. We represent 9 communities, so it's 8 towns in the city of Brockton. We offer 21 vocational programs throughout the school, and to say that we do a great job is really an understatement. So if you hadn't had a chance to be at the school, I definitely invite you to come over, take a look at what happens day to day there. I think you'd really be amazed at what the students do and the pride they have in the work they accomplish each day. That being said, again, 1,637 students, 61% from the city of Brockton. We offer 21 vocational programs that kids are working in and day out. The cost to Brockton per student is $4,779 to educate the students at the school. The state picks up the difference in the Chapter 70 budget. The FY24 assessment to the city of Brockton is $4,798,398, and that's for the FY24 school year. Again, our enrollment is up overall 6 students from FY23 to FY24 at Southeastern Regional, and again, we serve 9 communities. That's really a real high look at the school, our enrollment, the assessment. Our total budget for our Southeastern Regional is going to be here in a second, I'm sorry. $37,558,938 for the FY24 school year. I'll be more than happy if you have any detailed questions or if you want me to get into more detail about anything. Again, I know you have a busy agenda tonight and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'll be happy to answer any questions or.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Councilors? Councilor Farwell.
Good evening. I'm going to ask you a question to which I should know the answer, and I don't after all these years.
I hope I do.
It's not, I'm sure you will. At the end of our fiscal year, obviously, we do not expend all of the appropriations, and so the remaining balance becomes free cash. What happens if you don't spend the entire appropriation from all of the different towns for Southeastern Regional? And by the way, it is an exceptional school. I've always said you can graduate from Southeastern Regional, and instead of perhaps incurring significant college costs, you can go off into a trade and easily make $70,000 to $100,000. But getting back to my question, what happens if you have unencumbered funds at the end of the year? Where does it go?
So the process is very similar. So the Department of Revenue certifies our funds if there are any additional funds at the end of the school year, and they go into excess and deficiency. You have an excess and deficiency account.
Okay.
E&D.
So
it's a rainy day fund or free cash fund.
Retained revenue account?
Correct.
Okay, and is there a balance in it?
So as of last year, our balance was $835,000.
$835.
And we're allowed to have 5% of our total budget.
Yeah.
Carry there.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Morris, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate
Our
it.
best to Holly.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
The next department is the schools. Invited Michael Thomas, Superintendent of Schools.
Good evening, Superintendent Thomas.
Good evening, Council President. Thank you for having us. Much appreciated. I also want to thank school committee members Tim Sullivan, Judy Sullivan, and Tony Rodriguez for being here as well.
Thank you for thanking them, so I don't have to.
So calling your attention to, everybody has the PowerPoint right now, though?
Yes.
So obviously I'll go through this and stop me for any questions you have, and before, after, or during, and so we'll go through net school spending first. So as you see in FY23, net school spending equal $220,967,000. The requested amount for FY24 is $219,868,000. $7.3 million this year comes in from title grants. That's Title 1, 2, and 3. And then we have revenue from circuit breaker is $2 million, a total of $229,168,000. The city came in and did meet the budget at $219,868,000 as requested, and then there you have the funds from Title I, the title grants and circuit breaker for, again, the total $229,168,000. $229,168,000. Next is non-net school spending. No, I'm sorry, net school spending. This is the breakdown. Personal services is actual this year, $150,561,000. Next year's estimated personal services, $154,930,000. Non-certified is $33,555,000, and this year it's estimated at $35,076,000, and those are for increases. So those increases you see there is staff that after the RIFs. That's actually the staff that's moving forward. That includes all the step raises, any raises they get towards longevity, any step raises, as teachers, any staff member goes from step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It also includes any educational increases that are contractual as well. So that's the increase in the personal services certified, which is all BEA members and anybody that has to be certified from the Department of Education, non-certified, paras, administrative assistants, food service workers, facilities maintenance, custodians, and then ordinary maintenance is $36,977,000, and that's up to estimated at $39,141,000. Out-of-state travel, that is contractual. In the BEA contract, that's $20,000 every year that's put in for any out-of-state travel, and that stays every year. Again, that's per contract. Non-net, so...
This is just the revenue for...
What?
Revenues for non-net.
Non-net, yes. That's what I said, non-net. Sorry, Aldo's interrupted me. So the revenue from the city last year was $12,145,000. This year it's requested to be $14,778,000. And then revenue from circuit breaker was $1.5 million last year, $1.5 million this year. So FY24, the requested amount is $16,278,712. Non-net school spending for personnel services this year was $6,021,000. Transportation, so personnel services, transportation squarely for personnel services is $7,623,000. This year, as you can see, the requested for personnel services is $7,237,000, and transportation goes up to $9,041,000. And then that increases because this is our second year. We just finished our second year with our own transportation department. The first year we started with just the vans that do most of the services for special education students with disabilities. This past year, we added the rest of the large buses. We did have 10 buses last year, and they did mostly all field trips in athletics. We added the extra, how many, 60?
62 in total.
Yeah, so we have 62 in total. So we had 10 last year. We added 52 large buses, so now there's 62 total. In vans, there's 70, right?
There's about 70 of the...
70.
Of the vans.
70 of what they call mini buses, which they don't call vans anymore. So that's where we are. So estimated savings in FY23 from bringing transportation in-house was $2.9 million. And then the actual savings, so that's double, was 3.2.
3.2. We saved more.
We say, oh, you end up saying, so the estimated was 2.9, we actually saved 3.2. They have this?
Yes.
Okay, so if you look at the Brockton Schools non-net school spending analysis on transportation, just so you can see some cost. So this is where the projection was for, and we've actually researched what First Student is charging per bus now. So in FY23, we required 134 buses and vans for 182 days of service. They were getting 91,190 a bus. Total contract, if we went with First Student this past year, would have been $13,291,000. Our cost for FY23 for the same 134 vehicles is, and that's all expenses in, that's everything, $10,076,000. FY24 going into this year, we need more buses and trying to do more transportation in-house. First Student's contractual price is $102,166 per bus, which would come to $14,201,000. This year, again, same thing, we'll have 139 vehicles, which would cost us $11,232,000 all in. So the initial savings cost, again, last year was $3.2 million. This year coming up projected at $2.969 million. So what is eaten into some of the savings? We're still saving about $1 million to $1.5 million has been the special education and homeless riders that we have to use outside vendors for. We do not have the capacity yet to transport students out of district to tuition schools for special education services. We don't have enough capacity to transport our homeless population, which started this school year at 398 students and is now at 1,100. As we finished the year here in June, when the moratorium was lifted off evictions, our homeless population went up by 125%. So it went from 398 and change, obviously, up to over about 1,100 now for homeless students. So, basically, there was an extra $1 million in costs for this past school year. Next year, we're projecting that to be an extra $2.5 million in cost for transportation. So there's a couple of factors of that. Obviously, homeless transportation is a big part of it. Also, and you'll see this later in the presentation, we put more students out of district this past year, which is a large cost. It went up $2 million from previously predicted as we were going into the school year. When you have to put a student with disabilities out of district, it's for very serious mental health issues, and where that child cannot be serviced in the school district for various reasons. And it also comes down to safety of that child and safety of others in the school. So that cost has risen. There is a addendum in the governor's budget to try to give districts that had a large increase in out-of-district tuition and transportation some of that money back. So not only have we put more students in out-of-district placement, the cost of tuition for those out-of-district schools has gone up 15%. So And that's just an increase because those schools are having a hard time hiring people. As you know, in the mental health field, it's very difficult to find people, so their salaries have been increased to try to attract, and everybody's expenses has gone up, so that's been passed on to the public schools. Again, that's about 15% increase. So I don't know if you had any questions about the non-net budget before I go on.
Councilor Minichiello.
Good evening. Thank you for attending. Mr. Superintendent, should I address the question to you or to the resident transportation expert, school committee person, Tim Sullivan?
Yeah, Mr. Sullivan probably be better at answering it.
With respect to the busing department, let's call it, obviously, it's been about, what now, 3 years?
2.
And how are the changes from the first year in terms of smoothing and getting things a little smoother and more efficient?
It much more smoothly the second year. First year was difficult, especially in the first month of school. And then it kind of, and that's why I was glad we just started with the vans the first year. And then this year it's been much more efficient. It's the least amount of complaints I've ever seen in the years that I've been down at Central now in charge of operations, not only as the deputy, but I obviously, look at a lot now as superintendent. It's the least amount of complaints we've ever had with our transportation department as far as students being picked up on time, dropped off, the routes being, one issue we do have is we do scramble a lot because of absences, so there are times where you only have a certain amount of spare drivers and you have to fill in, so absences sometimes really hurt us, but overall it's been a lot better than what it would have been with first student.
You think that this year things will be even smoother than last year?
Yes.
Going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we did cut some positions in that department. I think we overstaffed to try to prepare ourselves because, as you know, in being in the education business, we're not in the transportation business. So I think we overstaffed, not for drivers, but some of the other areas of dispatches and some office help. So there's been cuts in that area, and we're hoping that
lean down a little bit.
Yes.
Good. Something we discussed, and I don't know if it's happening, but when Councilor D'Agostino and I were on the school committee, is ride share, meaning we felt the pain back then in terms of out-of-district kids. So we had talked about, let's say there's a child going to the Cardinal Cushing School out in Hanover, right? Checking with the school to see if on the way, is there a child from Rockland that's going?
Yep.
Is there a child from, wherever, Abington? And perhaps pooling with those communities and sharing, splitting the cost of that transportation. Are we doing that, or is it
we still do it.
We might be able to look into an increase, because, it changes every year. Obviously, students go to different places, but, it can be a lot of savings. One student picking up another student and splitting half of the cost, or the community might say, well, we're only 1/3 of the ride, so,
right.
but still, it's savings, on the way to that specialized school, ride sharing.
We do it. It's limited because I sign the charge-offs. Like we'll send bills to like a Randolph and they'll send bills to us. But you make a good point. It's something now that we should take a bigger look at that we can maybe expand on.
Well, I think every year it changes with the students.
Right. It depends on the student and.
So I think you're telling us that that's an increase.
Yes.
So I think it's probably worth looking into.
Absolutely.
If you need volunteers, Councilor D'Agostino and I will, go through the maps for you. So that's great. And it's good to hear that you're leaning things down with regard to, the management, so to speak, of the transportation department.
Correct. Yeah. Well, now that we're getting a handle on what it takes to run it and fuel the buses and the thing that about the buses, and this was something that, you kind of misjudge, is that you think you're buying everything, brand new, and they're going to come in and you're going to change the oil every few thousand miles, and maybe you do some brakes here and there, and they build these buses from scratch. So There's a lot of issues when when you get buses. There's a lot of times that we had to call, they're under warranty, and there was a lot of times buses had to come out of commission to make sure they, some of them came with missing items, some of them came where the door wasn't opening correctly. So, they put these together pretty quickly. Well, they don't really put them together quickly, but when they put them together, there's some missteps, we should say, and then obviously they're inspected every morning and every afternoon, and then they have to be taken off the road if there's anything with the stop bar or the stop sign, and even though they came in brand new, it's not like that, all of a sudden you just put them out there and they're going. There's been issues, more issues than we expected with the mechanicals.
Right, but those are the growing pains that
Oh, yeah.
go with a new operation that, where we, don't have a long track record with.
Correct.
So, it's good to see that you're working through it, because the savings was obviously the motivator, the lack of competition. The alternative was, as we all know, to eliminate busing for certain students, and we didn't
Right.
want to do that because we want kids to get to school, instead of, if they don't have that transportation. So, I mean, obviously from the city council's perspective, all the ride sharing, research you can do, please do, try to work out some more of the financial kinks, because, that obviously is the motivation to having the city council and the city contribute for that whole new department, so, and it's good to see that we're still saving money, but I think that, there's always still more money that can be saved, as far as I'm concerned, and it just takes a little bit of time.
Yep.
A little bit of effort. We did it when we were there, and I know that it can still be done. You've got a great school committee that can handle things. I see Joyce Azak just walked in, so you've got a great school committee there, and hi Joyce, how are you? My old colleague. So thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
You're welcome.
Good to talk to you, and keep up trying to save more money on that transportation.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Mr. Superintendent. So I see that there's just for my own education, and maybe everybody else is listening, I see there's a $500,000 increase in the homeless rider transportation cost. I'm just a little confused. What is a homeless rider? Would that be?
So
Yeah,
when
if you could explain
a
that.
child in a Brockton is a Brockton Public School student, and they become homeless and have to move out of the city into either a shelter, or they're placed in a relative's home, and it could be up to an hour away. McKinney-Vento law requires that child and the family have the option to stay in the Brockton Public Schools, and you are obligated under the law to transport them every day from an hour away back to Brockton, and that's every day. So not all of the 1,100 students are homeless outside of the city. I think there's about 450 that are homeless in Brockton that are outside the city that we have to transport. The in-house transportation we built because we're only in our second year, we built it just to do in-district transportation. So those homeless runs, that could be either up to about $350 a day for one student. Obviously, if there's students on the way, we pick them up. That's all worked out. But you have to contract that all out to private vendors. There's 7D vendors that do that work. So that's where you see the big increase in the homeless. So obviously, you're not spending that much when we only had 384, but once it ballooned to 1,100, then that really drove the.
And that's
cost
grades
up.
K through 12?
Yes,
And is there a geographic limit to that?
it's 1 hour.
So it's a
1 hour
time?
in time.
Okay.
Yep.
What's that work out to be, an hour?
I would say
60
they average
miles.
about 60 miles. Yep.
And what percentage of Brockton students who become homeless choose to remain in the Brockton school system?
I would say about 80% of them choose to stay. They get to stay for the rest of the school year, but there's also a stipulation in the McKinney-Vento law that if the family can prove that it's not stable, they could start the following school year. So some years, and get approval through the Department of Education. So We do have some students that have been with us for 2 years now, and some 3 years. And if they're given that dispensation, then they're allowed to stay, and we need to continue to transport.
Okay, well, I appreciate that explanation. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Counselor D'Agostino.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for joining us on this stormy, rainy night. Getting back to McKinney-Vento, has there ever been because that's a reimbursement, right? The state funds a reimbursement of those expenses. Has there ever been a year where that's been fully funded?
I think this is the first year.
That's what I had heard, that this was the first year they were going to fully fund it in the upcoming budget.
Exactly.
Okay.
So but it's also a year in arrears when you think about it. You go through the year, you file your report at the end of the year, then the following year they reimburse you. So you're fronting the cost.
Right, so we're funding it up front.
A year
and then
behind.
getting reimbursed later. Right, and so hopefully when we're having this conversation a year from now we'll have had for the first time that I'm aware of, gotten full reimbursement. I'm glad to hear that the state is going to step up and fully fund that. You mentioned that there are more out-of-district placements with our students with disabilities. And I know that at least when I was on the committee several years back, we had looked at trying to bring as many of those in as we could and try to find ways to provide services. Is there a reason that we're kind of going in the opposite direction where we're placing more out of the district?
2 reasons. Number one, the Huntington School had to be totally redesigned. It was not working for students, so I had to totally redesign that school, which dropped enrollment. That's one, and now that's pretty much being rebuilt, and the next year we'll be able to take students back. It's also going to be able to service, so there's a lot of students that, and another cost that a lot of people don't see is when a student really needs an emergency 45-day evaluation, that is showing severe signs of mental health issues, then they have to go on a 45-day evaluation process. And a lot of that now, this past year, it's been done by outside schools at a cost that could be up to $15,000 to $20,000. Those will bring much more of those in-house next year. So the first issue was there was issues that I needed to fix for the Huntington School. Students were not succeeding. They were not seeing and getting the same standard of curriculum as the rest of other students. So there were a lot of violations there that needed to be fixed. That's one reason. The second reason is even the Huntington can't handle some of the severity of mental health issues that are going on. So there are, as you know, I'll know in school safety is a big topic. And there are students who are really become a danger to themselves and to others that it is much more safe to place them in an out-of-district placement for everybody's safety, including obviously their own.
Okay. All right. And the other thing I wanted to mention on transportation, we talked about the savings, and that is absolutely very, very important, of course, and that was something we looked at again and again and again, and, over and over to make sure that we had done the math right on that back several years ago when we did it. And as my colleague, Councilor Minichiello, mentioned, we were a part of that and went over it very, very closely. I think the other thing that I just want to remind people about that we accomplished, too, is that we have more control. There are other districts, I want to say wasn't it Boston just a few years ago, that their vendor, again, they had a third-party company handling transportation, and they have a strike.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was a New Hampshire company, but I think it was the Boston's transportation.
It was Boston.
Right, and so that's something that they had no control over that. They weren't even at the table with that bargaining unit. It was that transportation vendor's negotiations that broke down. And that's just one of many examples I could give, and I don't want to go on too long, but of why it became important for us to be more in control. And in case everybody doesn't know, the other issue was because of the size of the district and the number of buses needed, it was really one bidder. So it was essentially a no-bid contract. So
For years.
They could have done whatever they wanted, price-wise. There wouldn't have been anything we could have done about it. We had no say, no control, no negotiating power, really. And I think that's an important point that I just want to remind folks of.
And they did.
Yeah, yes, and they did use that, but now we're in that position where we're at the table when there's bargaining and negotiating, and it's our own people, just like all the other collective bargaining units that the district has, right?
Yeah, they're members of the Teamsters.
Right.
653.
Right, and so at least now you're not kind of on the sidelines.
Right.
Hoping that they can work everything out, and also hoping that even though they know they've kind of got you over a barrel, they don't take advantage too much. And, and that's nothing against any particular vendor, it's just the nature of the situation we had because of our size. Nobody was interested.
Right, and it's another important note, as Boston is in severe corrective action from the Department of Education because strictly of their buses not running on time, especially their special ed transportation not being on time. So you're right, the control is big because if you cannot get students with disabilities to school on time, if they're a half hour late, 15 minutes late, sometimes in Boston, they're up to 2 hours late.
Jesus.
That's hundreds of thousands of dollars that you have to spend in compensatory services for special education students. So for every minute that they miss of their education, the parent can request from the Department of Education, and they will and they should, because obviously time on learning is time on learning, and every minute less, especially for a student with an IEP, then you now have to provide more home tutoring, where you're spending money on someone going to the home, or you keeping the student in later and paying somebody overtime to provide those services to that student. So that's something that a lot of people don't see. But you could be in severe trouble with the Department of Ed if your students with disabilities continue to get to school not on time.
Right.
And it could cost you tens of thousands.
Right.
So that's another big reason that it's good to have full control over it, because, sometimes when you're dealing with a vendor like Boston does, your kind of hands are tied.
Right,
Because
exactly.
what are you going to do now? I'm going to throw this vendor out. Who are you going to get?
Well, and that was exactly right. If they're not getting it done, again, like you said, your hands are tied because of the size, and I'm sure that's their situation too.
Right.
Okay, like I said, I just wanted to bring that up. In addition to the financial reasons, there was also, for lack of a better way to put it, a need for us to really be the captain of our own destiny, if you will, for lack of a better way to put it, and so that we didn't have to face some of these other issues that other districts have had to deal with on transportation. Final thing I wanted to just go over with this real quick, and I noticed, and I just want to make sure my thought on it is correct. When you look at, in the budget book that we received, net school spending budget development plan, obviously there is on personal services, a continuing uptick, and on transportation, a continuing down, and I assume that is the shift from paying a vendor and having minimal staff of our own to having staff of our own and not paying a vendor. I just wanted to confirm that my thinking on that is correct.
What page are you looking at?
The page is numbered? I don't think. Oh, it's the first page. That one.
Oh, yes, that's exactly what you're saying, is us hiring more staff, more drivers.
Right, and it's kind of that
That was the extra
shift of in-house, or from vendor to in-house.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you, that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is someone else? Okay. Well, I have two questions.
Madam Chair?
Superintendent Thomas,
Sure.
you mentioned that the number of homeless students increased from 398 to 1,100, so that they nearly tripled.
Yes.
And those are children from homes in Brockton who have had reversal of circumstances.
Correct. Absolutely.
And so, of course, we're so concerned about them, but I know you were kind enough to send me a list of schools and jobs that were affected by pink slips,
Yep.
by layoffs. What is the impact of the reduction of those many counselors on these children and others?
It's, it's a huge impact because you obviously need to, those students who, especially with homeless students and students struggling with, not that homeless students are struggling with mental illness, but they're struggling possibly with mental illness, but also with, being displaced from their home. So obviously they need more services and supports through social emotional support. So, any loss in any staff, especially in adjustment counselors or interventionists or behaviorist positions is a tough hit. Because we added so many of them during the pandemic, and, mentors and interventionists, behaviorists, and extra guidance counselors, psychologists. It was, we added a lot during the 3 years of the pandemic, and so losing any of them is tough. We were able to maintain, by what the enrollments are at each school, to try to make sure we use those, they get the support they need. But again, we didn't want to lose anybody. But that is a hit.
Terrible hit.
Yep.
And tell us, I was there last Thursday night at Brockton High School to hear you speak to the parents, and I heard your announcement that you're going to step into the role of the principal at Brockton High for at least part of your day. How will you ever balance these two huge jobs?
So first, I want to make clear how important it is to get Brockton High back to where it needs to be. So I see that as the entire district right now. And this is what I mean when I say that. We're bleeding enrollment, and we can go over how many kids we've lost, and most of those kids been at the high school level. We also take phone calls all the time. Guidance counselors inform us that students continue, especially in middle school, 8th graders continue to say they do not want to go to Brockton High because they think, it's unsafe. All the, the stories and information that comes out, stabbing, and those kind of things make parents obviously upset and worried. So if they're already at Brockton High, some have taken their children out. And then the biggest thing we've heard from the 8th graders this year is, a lot of them do not want to go. And we're hearing it now, and this is what's really troubling. We're hearing it now when students are leaving the 5th grade and ready to go to a middle school, because the parents are saying, well, should I get them into another middle school somewhere? And so they're prepared to then be in another district or a private school. So if we can't get Brockton High right, and I think that's why I have to be the one to go up and actually do the work, because for every student we lose from Brockton High, so if we lose another 300 students from Brockton High next year, or 400 students, that's between 6 and 8 million. You just can't cut that $8 million loss in enrollment just at Brockton High School. It's impossible. That cut affects the whole district, pre-K to 12. So we have to stop the bleeding of enrollment at the high school. And then so I made a big decision to reorganize the whole administrative structure of Brockton High. That's why I feel strongly I have to be the one to lead it. There's also times when you look at a superintendent's calendar, and a lot of things that are in there that take you away from the work of actually what you need to do for kids. There's a lot of stuff that gets in there that, quite frankly, doesn't need to get in there. So I think that, the district can go a year with, me leading the high school from my experience from being there before. Under Sue Zakowicz, when Brockton High was clearly the flagship of the district and a champion of the state and across the country, highly recognized as one of the best high schools in the United States. So I know the work, I've done the work, and I think it's important to, let people know that, and again, I'm not saying anything bad about the current principal, because Cindy was asked to go there in a very difficult situation, and she wasn't supposed to be there long term, but there's major changes that need to happen, and I need to be the one to lead them, and I need to be the one out in the community making sure that it's not only the staff or me or the other administrators that will be at Brockton High that need to change the climate and culture, it's all of us. So I will hold myself accountable and the staff accountable first. I will hold students accountable for behavior or lack thereof, for attendance and for their grades, and I am going to hold the parents accountable to be a partner in that. I meet with parents all the time. I'll meet with more of them as now that I'll be the principal there, and it's got to be all of us, and all of us taking accountability to making Brockton High what it needs to be again, and that's why I made that decision. But I appreciate you asking that.
That's important. And you have assistant superintendents, don't you?
Yes, I have. Well, there's one less. We cut a superintendent, assistant, so there will also be Deputy Superintendent Jim Cobbs will be coming up to high school with me as well. And he'll continue as Deputy Superintendent, but he's going to pretty much oversee our safety, security, and if we are talking about going to a new cell phone policy, so he'll help with the rollout of that, and everything else tied to safety, security, as far as the cameras, the walkie-talkies, the metal detectors. So I think it was important, and also there'll be another assistant superintendent coming up as well, who's in charge of data and accountability to really work with teachers and administrators on, tracking students, their progress, trying to get students early, so we make sure we get students into remediation programs quickly. We have students failing, especially freshmen, at alarming rates. Freshmen have always struggled in ninth grade, has always struggled in all high schools, but in urban school districts, they really struggle. So we got to do something more proactive with our freshmen that continue to fail. And we can't keep seeing second year and third year freshmen. That has to stop. And so there's a lot has to be done. That's why I thought it was very important for me to lead that work.
You'll also have assistant principals, right?
Yes, yep, you'll have, your assistant principals that are still, so there are no cuts to the administration at Brockton High School. It's just redesigned.
We represent the city. I'm sure I speak for everyone to say we support you, and you need our help, holler.
Thank you.
Councilor Azak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Superintendent. Good evening, Mr. CFO. First of all, I think what you're doing is amazing. I have to tell you, when I first heard about it, I was like, oh my, I really felt for you. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I have faith, and I think you're going to be amazing, and I look forward to seeing, down the line where we're going to go with this. I think you inspire us, but what you just said, what you want to do, I think that's really inspirational. And as a parent, I think it's also, it gives us faith in the system. So I know it's not going to be easy, but I think it's amazing what you're doing. I wanted to just compliment you on the new commercial advertisement. So it really highlights the best of Brockton, which I think is really great, because we only hear about the negative the majority of the time. Actually, just before this meeting, I bumped into two of our finest Brockton Miss Kelly and Miss Thomas. I bumped into them over at Jerry's Farm, and, I told them how beautiful and how amazing the musical was. And, we don't always hear about the best things in Brockton, and that's just sad. As a city councilor, as a parent, as a Brockton High alum, I just feel like we have an amazing system, school system. So I'm excited to see we're going to fix it and we're going to move forward. But where is this ad, where's it going, this publicity, this video?
So a couple things. So it would be widely advertised in all of our recruitment efforts and efforts to keep students in the district. So we'll be having a lot of showings at different places. We'll use it for recruitment, bringing students back to the district. I want to thank the school committee for budgeting this, and school committee member Tony Rodriguez for recommending the Rui, who did the actual video. I actually had Rui in school at East, and it was a all Brockton production, which was amazing. And not only that, is going back to marketing. The communications director will also be based out of Brockton High School. because I want positive news being put out every day on Facebook, Twitter. I don't usually use any of those, but we need to get information out every day about whatever, even if it's a minor thing that happens. We need to send positive information out daily about what's the good things about Brockton High. Like you saw, if you didn't see in the paper, the 10 top students in the class. It's like we shouldn't wait till the end when the Enterprise does a story on them in June, that 6 of them are going to Ivy League schools and so on and so forth. I mean, that stuff's got to be tweeted and put out constantly to the community, texted out. But we don't do a good job of marketing ourselves, and that's one of the reasons we've lost our kids. And so what happens is you let the media take over when there's one bad thing that happens, and that's why you got to put out 400 good things that happen to combat that, because things are going to happen. And I said this to the school committee, just because I'm principal doesn't, when you have 3,500 teenagers in one place, there are going to be fights, there are going to be disagreements, and there have been, and I graduated in '87, and we had some horrible things happen then. So, there are things that are going to happen, because that's just the nature of teenagers that make poor choices. But what we have to make sure and I said this at the school committee meeting last time, we had somebody from the outside come in and bash us. And I said that, Brockton High is just as good as any high school across the state. The problem is you're not going to hear that about the W towns where sinks are also getting ripped off the wall on a Snapchat. Vaping is closing bathrooms, and those kind of, it happens everywhere. But unfortunately, it's always the big high schools where most of the students are students of color, or English language learners, or students with disabilities that always take the hit, and they usually ride by those other towns that have that kind of same bad news and ignore it. And that's something that always, I know, Councilor Rodriguez has said that over and over again for years, and as mayor, and school committee has said it all the time, is that we have to do a better job talking about the good things. Like we had the stabbing that Friday at the high school, and I can't remember the exact, maybe May 16th. And that weekend, that night, I was back there for the musical Mamma Mia, and it was like something you would see on Broadway. I mean, and I'm not kidding, it was a Broadway production done by those kids, the most diverse cast we have ever had, and like we went from someone almost dying and being stabbed, and to that production, and people have to run. It's maybe 3% of the students that cause most of the issues, and 97% of the students are there to learn and there to have fun as high school teenagers, and but we need to do a better job. And again, we have to pump out good things, just keep pumping it out.
I agree, and I think that's great. If you do, the more the positive, we'll kind of get rid of, put the negative stuff behind us. I think that's a great idea to constantly promote the positive. So I once again, whatever, as Council President Nicastro said, and if you need our support, we're here to support you.
Thank you.
And, I always say we have the best school system, and you're right, we only hear about the negative stuff, but there's amazing things happening, and programs that are offered at Brockton High that are, I have daughters in college, and when they tell somebody they came from Brockton High, they all frown, but we have the same programs that they have at some of the prep schools, some of the, when they say, well, they were learning Chinese, everybody like, oh, really? Like at Brockton? But we have amazing programs. I know we'll continue to develop our school system. So thank you again.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you to the school committee members. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. CFO, welcome. Members of the school committee, great to see you all. Mr. Superintendent, there's always some confusion, at least in the eyes of the community, about how charter schools are funded. People sometimes don't realize that most of us are not against charter schools, or we just have a problem with the way they're funded.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that, just to kind of give the folks at least that are watching us at home how sometimes, charters do affect the funding that comes along with the system?
So Aldo, you can tell us what came in to the city and then what then gets, so Chapter 70 comes into the city and then boom, that same day, pretty much withdrawn is the charter school numbers, So
the way they're funded is that they look at our entire student body, and you get funded a base rate for every student. Then you get funded additional dollars if they're English language learners. You get funded additional dollars if they're low income, and you get funded additional dollars if they're special education. They come up with one blended rate for the entire Brockton school system for every student, which for us this year is $17,790 per student. So when a student goes and leaves and goes to a charter school, they take 100 of those students, they get that same blended rate, even though they might not have the special ed student, they might not have the low-income student. They still get our dollars that was based off of our student body. So we started out, in your book you saw in 2020, in FY20, we were paying out $15,900,000 to charter schools. We are now, 4 years later, $29.8 million, almost $30 million is going out to charter schools. And those, again, they're getting our dollars that are based off our students. And quite often, those students are a lot less expensive to educate. So that's where we really lose.
yeah, they don't keep the number of English language learners that we educate, students with disabilities that we educate. And sometimes it's interesting when some of those students come back on October 2nd to the school district. So that is something that can happen often too. Public schools are not allowed to send students out, and if you do, you're paying big money for it, like we just talked about with out-of-district placement, but, we're not able to say to the charter school, okay, you're going to take these 10 kids on October 2nd, but they are allowed to send those kids back to us.
And keep the funding.
And the funding stays until the following, obviously, October 1st.
Say that again?
So if a student...
I heard you, but I want to make sure.
Okay, yeah, so if a student comes back from a school after October 1st, so anytime from October 2nd to June 30th, you pretty much, you have to obviously educate that child, rightfully so, but you won't get funded for that child unless they're on your books the following October 1st. And that's something that we've discussed, and I know, we are fully funded through the Student Opportunity Act. I want to thank Senator Brady and Rep. Michelle Dubois and our new Rep. Rita Mendez and Jerry Cassidy for really fighting in the school committee prior with Tom and Mark, with Superintendent Smith, who really put a lot into, almost suing the state to then get the Student Opportunity Act passed. So we are fully funded, but there's still a hole with that October 1st to the end of the year number. And this has been something that we've argued about, even though we are fully funded, that there's a lot of students that come to us between October and June 30th, and we're not funded for them. And then a lot of students, we have a population that moves. And a lot of those students will probably not be with us again in October 1st, but you educated them all year, like rightfully so, and then, and that's like, we're looking to see, could there be a pothole fund for something for the students that do come, and we've been asking about this back since 2012, when the tragedy happened in Haiti with the large earthquake, and I think Mr. Minicello was on the committee at the time. We ended up getting over 500 students from Haiti, and that's Brockton. You take all students, and we, a great Haitian community, and, we brought those kids into school, and obviously you have to add bilingual teachers and specialists and more counselors, and that was done by the school department. But then a lot of those students returned And I forget at the time, I think it was Mayor Balzotti that, continued to go after the state for funding with the school committee members, and they never sent a dime for any of those students that came in. And that was 500 students that came in that cost probably the school district close to $3 million. And then a lot of them were gone and back home by the following October. So even though, again, we are fully funded through Student Opportunity Act, and we're very grateful for that, but it's still that whole, and this is for all urban districts that see a lot of movement, is that between October 1st and June 30th, if there could be some kind of a pothole fund for districts that get a real bump in enrollment between those months.
So where are those conversations with the state in the sense? Because, if you think about it, again, let me preface by saying I'm not against charter schools. I'm not against, because I'm for education. It doesn't matter where the kids are getting educated as long as they're getting educated. But it's also not a fair process if you're taking resources from a school system like ours to send it to a charter, and then the charters will turn around and send the kid back to you and keep the funds. So where does that stand? I think Brockton was born fighting. We had the fighters here. I think it's important for us to continue to fight. Perhaps we need to go after them again in the sense, because if it's affecting us, perhaps the way it's not affecting some of the other districts, I think we owe it to the kids who are left behind, because they take the cream of the crop, and then we're stuck with the kids that need a lot more services to be able to service. So has there been any talk, at least in the school committee, to figure out something in terms of, can we legally go after the state and say, look, how is this fair in the sense where, the students went to charter, came back a month later, and those funds stay there? That's just a nice little gimmick to have going on, to be honest with you, because honestly, if you're running a charter, you would go and get all these students and then kick them all back to the system and keep your funds.
Yep. No, I think there's something that we need to, again, we should look into, work with our state delegation, and it's also a focus of the Urban Superintendent Network, which I'm a part of. We meet every Friday. That's all the urban districts in the state, and we have a strong leadership. Mary Bork is now the president of MASS, and she was part of the work done with Superintendent Smith around getting the Student Opportunity Act in place, and she is retired. She's from Chelsea, and she is actually, they have a very strong lobbying effort, so I think we should maybe plan to maybe have a meeting with her soon, and just see how we can go about, especially that October 1st issue.
Do you have any idea as far as the number of kids that actually came back into the system that
right now, I actually do. I gotta put my glasses on. So if you look at your enrollment sheet, I gave you separately, if you look at, so I gave you what the October 1st enrollment was, and you can see since 2015, I just wanted to see the drop in enrollment. But if you look at from 2022, our enrollment that will get funded on, with being funded on this year, is 15,201. But on June 1st, right now, we're finishing the year with 15,456. So about 255 more students that have come in, and that, basically returned.
The district didn't get anything for.
Yeah, not all, I'm going to say all of them came back from private or charter schools, but, good amount. And then obviously people moving into this district. And again, that's a number that we hope will carry into October 1st of this 2023 and hopefully go up a bit. But it's an example how we're always adding students throughout the year.
Well, you and I on the Saturday of our graduation and that nice weather we had talked about perhaps some of the other thoughts that you've had in terms of growing the numbers back, and we actually had talked about how. By the way, I graduated in 1980, and we had all the problems in 1980 that you had in 1989. That it's actually a lot less than it used to be back in the days. I remember back in the 80s, in the 90s, the push was for trade. Everybody wanted to go to trade school, military trade school. Very few folks actually went on to college. In the 2000s, I think the push was more for science and technology. Everybody wanted to be a doctor, a scientist, a computer engineer, or whatever. But I think we have noticed a trend of it returning back to
Big time.
to the trades again, because I was just talking to my colleague a little while ago. You know, you got plumbers making $375 an hour.
Right.
You know, lawyers aren't making that. You know, some doctors might not even making that. You know, so you had talked about a plan that you actually have that you wanted to move forward in terms of, you know, how to grow perhaps the
Chapter
the trade
74.
program. The trade
Yes, so-
program in the schools. Can you talk to us a little
Absolutely.
bit about
So it's, CTE, Career and Technical Education. And it's also funded by, it's called Chapter 74, where we end up getting, I believe, 23,000 per student. 23 to 24,000 students. So it's about 5,000 to 6,000 more per student if they're in a CTE Chapter 74 state-approved program. The issue is now we can't, until we get a new Brockton High School, we can't expand those programs for obvious reasons. We just don't have the space. And the state's starting to push us to do more of those programs at the middle school level like we used to have when we were kids, the old industrial arts programs. So we have been speaking with Troy, the mayor, Aldo. A school committee has seen there's the Porter-Chester building, which is across on Belmont Street. And that could be coming available very soon. What I've talked about the mayor with, what I talked about with you and the school committee is there a way we can approach the county for any leftover opera money to be able to purchase that property and have it as an annex of Brockton High School. If you haven't been in there, it's a state-of-the-art trade school, which is struggling to stay in there, and the owner of that building is very interested in having the school department move in. If you haven't seen it, it's got HVAC and electrical and framing and dental hygienist and a certified nursing assistant. It has a full auto shop that basically competes with any car dealership. Hold about 600 students. But again, it's because we really can't grow our Chapter 74 programs at Brockton High because of the facility, and you can't really do any major construction because asbestos would all have to be abated. So somehow getting that building, which again was, I believe, redone when PetSmart and Staples moved out, and when I first went in there with the school committee, and we took a look around, it is amazing. It is truly an amazing location with top-notch, and it would add that many more kids to come back to the system. But again, it's funding. I believe we did put out a bid. It came in at about $500,000 a year to lease that property. And again, with our budget, that was not going to be feasible. So we were asking the mayor, and I had this conversation with Councilor Rodriguez before the graduation, can we call for a meeting with the Plymouth County Commissioners and see if that is something that would be an allowable cost with money they have left over in opera. And that would be a huge help in the recovery. I mean, that money is supposed to be spent on recovery of COVID and loss of learning and extra opportunities for students and to grow CTE. So that's something I think we need to have but thank you for bringing that up.
I mean, honestly, I think it's a no-brainer when you sit down and think about it. If we are losing students because they're going into other systems for trade classes and programs, why not do something in our own system to keep our own kids in the city, in a sense?
Correct.
And I think if you got to sit down and look at it in terms of, I mean, even the issues that are going on at the high school, is it really, kids are going to school and you get a degree in, business or whatever, you get a 4-year college degree in business that now equates to what, a high school diploma in some instances? You can't really do anything with that. So I think it's kind of fizzles downward in the sense,
Right.
in terms of attitude and everything else. So I think it's important for us to seriously, as a body in the sense, to figure out a way to do this. And when I say a body, I'm talking about city government. For us to come together and realize that we need to invest in this, because the little that we invest in a year or so, it'll grow into a full-fledged program.
Pay for itself 10 times over.
It'll pay for itself and even help the part of the system grow.
Right, because you make a good point. So, as you heard, how many students go to Southeastern? So that's about pretty much 1,000 students that are in grades 9 to 12 at Southeastern. So, they take about 300 freshmen, but then there's 800 that apply from Brockton, and they take about 300. So we have in our system now, coming into Brockton High next year, 500 students that really wanted to go in to a trade school and get into CTE programs. So now those students end up going to Brockton High, very limited space in CTE, and now they're wandering around because they're not engaged, because there's nothing, their interests aren't piqued, and now there's fights, there's, misbehavior because we're not engaging them. So you have 500 students every year that come up to Brockton High School that really wanted to go to Southeastern, but with a place like this Porter Chester building, we would be able to service, their needs and keep them from dropping out, failing, that's a good point.
Well, I just want to let you know that, first of all, kudos to you for going back to the high school. It just shows commitment that you're taking this stuff seriously. But you know what? If you're dealt, twos or whatever when you're playing cards, unless they're four of a kind, it doesn't really serve you in some ways. But I think it's important for us just to seriously put our minds together and see how we can actually work on this. And I think as soon as we're done with all this budget issue, we're going to step forward and really do, some of that outreach that we need to do to make sure that we get the funds to do that. Because, again, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
If we've got students out there that want to do this, why kick them out of the system when we can keep them at home?
100%.
Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Farwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
It's pretty extraordinary what you're doing with the dual position of superintendent and principal, because I'm going to tell you that this Commonwealth is full of public officials who would sit on the sidelines timidly, afraid to take any action for fear that they'd be criticized, that why haven't you done this before, why haven't you done things differently? And so I hope people don't miss the fact that in your instance and in this city, if we see an issue that demands attention, it's going to be addressed. And to have the superintendent step forward and do that, and I'm not blowing smoke at you, as they say, I'm right. I mean, you've got fellow superintendents that would run in the opposite direction at 50 miles an hour and not tackle what you're going to do. My first question is there a possibility this will take more than a year of your time?
I hope not. I hope that it could. It could. I mean, I'm not going to, if I don't feel that we've made that much progress, and if I don't feel confident that there's a new leader that can be there and stay there for a long period of time, which I think, when we hire the new leadership up there, and then, I think we would put an ad out probably around February to try to see, and that's the best way to see what we can attract for a new person, but it's got to be the right person. It's very difficult for someone to come from the outside, not saying it had to be an outsider, but if you're going to really do a search for principal and you make a decision to bring an outsider in, you got to be very careful about that, because as you know, Brockton people, they want to see Brockton people lead their school system, and because they know people, they know the community. So you got to have that give and take of finding the next leader. But it could take more than a year. It all depends. But I'm actually. People think I'm crazy, but I'm actually excited about it, because I really look forward to the work. Because there's great people at the high school, and it's just, it's work that needs to be done, and I know how much support the school committee has given me and how much support the council will be, and, I appreciate you saying that, but it could take a little bit longer. I hope not, but it could.
So having clear goals and objectives for learning as well as student conduct is absolutely essential. So I guess my question to you is, you're going to get pushback. Oh, you're heavy-handed. Oh, you shouldn't have done this to my son or daughter. Oh, you're discriminatory. Tell me a little bit about how we're going to handle that, because I can just see it coming. And the reason I ask that is that in some respects, and this is kind of a two-part question, a lot of people think we're in charge of the high school, but is it not a fact that the state has some guidelines for suspensions and discipline? So what we might regard as completely unacceptable, and we do not want that taking place, and perhaps we want to do something with that particular student, there are limitations, correct? So
limitations, especially with the chronic school things, is limitations on safety, security, so you can still do long-term suspensions for, weapons, drugs, assaultive behavior on staff. But there's a lot of the disruption piece that students really disrupting class a lot, limits you how many, days you can suspend them, and what you have to do before, like all the interventions you have to show in writing that you did for a student before you suspend them. For those the state calls now minor offenses. But it's a good question you ask about, so you talk about discrimination and too many high suspension rates. If we're not, first of all, we have to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that, kids are treated with a respectful way, and even when you discipline them, it should be respectful, and it should be, conversations with the parents. But if we continue to allow a student to go into their second and third year of a freshman, and they're 17 as a freshman, and they continue to cut class, wander around the building, cause trouble, and take education away from kids that are there, that want to graduate in 4 years, want to go into a trade, I am doing a disservice to that family and that student. To me, that's discrimination. To me, it's like, if I have a student of color that is at the high school and they are failing drastically, and we continue to allow them to fail, which has been happening, and they're now a second and third year freshman, what is the parent asking me? How did you allow this to happen? And I can't say, well, I felt bad, I didn't want to hold them accountable, or needed to suspend them a couple of times, because, out of school suspension is not always going to work. There are times it's needed, obviously, for the safety of the school. But there are other interventions you can put in place to hold students accountable, to make sure classrooms are not getting disrupted. But what I say about the discrimination piece is basically that I think it's a real disservice to any student, but especially students of color, to allow them to continue to come to a school and fail year after year and then drop out with no accountability. Because to me, that's a school to prison pipeline, but that's where you have to have honest conversations with the parents, because it's what my conversation is. Like, I meet with students now and their parents when they get into these situations and say, what do you want for your child? It's not going well. They're in their third year as a freshman and they're still not going to class, and you're going to come back to me when they're 18, 19, 20, say, why didn't you do something for them? They can't get a job, they're in trouble, and they dropped out. It's a horrible cycle that we're in. So accountability has to come back. Parents should actually expect that from me. Even parents of students that misbehave and don't do the right thing, if I don't do something to fix that and hold us all accountable to fix that, then to me, that's discrimination, because we're allowing students that, continue to fail, and we still keep doing the same thing over and over again, and now we have more students staying back and failing and now dropping out. And, to me, that's a big problem. And again, that, I don't mean you go in there and you just start suspending kids like they were able to do 10, 15, 20 years ago, because it's proven out-of-school suspension does not work, especially for the chronic school offenders. It has to work for students that are dangerous. If students are fighting all the time and they continue to fight, or they're assaulting teachers, or verbally very assaultive to teachers, or weapons, they do need to be removed. But other students who are chronic school offenders that just can't behave themselves in class, we have to, I don't believe in you really need to, you cannot always send them out for suspension, because that does not work, because then they're just missing more learning. But we have to do other things to re-engage them into school, but that has to be done in a way that we have to, like, first it has to be myself accountable in administration, and all the teachers as well. Like, we have to make sure when we're addressing students, it's respectful, so they address us back in a respectful manner. So when you talk about, you got to walk into Brockton High School, there's got to be a culture of accountability and an expected code of conduct when you walk in that door, how you should act, how you should treat each other, from adult to adult, student to student, student to adult, and adult to student. That's what has to come back. That decorum of how we treat each other has to come back, and there will be pushback. There will be parents who will be angry with me because I will discipline their child, but it's in a way is we need to do something to get, we need to get them back, because if we don't do something now, they're going to be a third-year freshman and they're going to drop out. And so there's students that's why we have these other alternative programs, like our night school. We have some online learning, so there are other places that a best fit might not be Brockton High School, and we have to show the student that there is a better way for them to get their diploma. But you're right, there will be pushback, and I do want, and I will publicly say, I will be holding, number one, I'm holding myself accountable because I'm doing 2 jobs. Secondly, I'm going to be holding the staff accountable at the high school to make sure we're doing right by students. And I'll hold students accountable. That means I need to hold their parents accountable. And parents will have to come in and meet with me. They will have to sit with me and go through grades, attendance, cuts, and that's how you build relationships, and that's how we're going to build the school back to having a culture of respect for everybody. And that has to come back, because if it doesn't, we're failing those kids.
And it will take everyone, because changing a brand is difficult. And you know what, folks? It is true. People feel that the high school is unsafe. I don't believe I think there are incidents that we would prefer not happen. I wouldn't say it's unsafe, but you really have a challenge ahead. But if we don't do it, it's heartbreaking to think of all the programs that we have at that high school, all of the awards that have been won. And I don't mean just in athletics, in drama, in jazz band, and everything else. To have a child afraid to go to a school like that, it really is heartbreaking, and it has to change. Last question for you, and I warned you I was going to ask this. This $18 million that's been bandied about, someone said, well, I hope they've got the receipts to show where it's going, and it's a projected deficit because of different things. But talk to me a little bit about class size. What will we do to make sure that loss in additional reimbursements for enrollment, as well as the rising costs, don't skew our class size to a point where it would compromise someone's education?
Here's my class size list. So class size currently, and I have it somewhere, but if I don't have it, I know it because I've been over it several times. So class size currently through basically from kindergarten, currently this year, kindergarten runs right about 21, 22. So K1, 2, and 3 are running about 21 to 22. K1, 2 will stay at that 22 number, pretty much. It looks like now with the projected enrollment coming in. 3 to 5 is right around 24 now. That could be at 25, 26 next year. Middle school is very low. We have currently Most middle schools have class size of 18 to 20. Some classes at middle schools are at 16 to 15 currently. Those will grow to about 24, 25 next year, which is pretty much the standard for a middle school classroom. The high school now, most of the classes are in between 21 and 25. Again, low for a high school. The core classes like your freshman English, sophomore English, all your major subjects that are the required classes for graduation will be around 26. The elective classes for a lot of juniors and seniors take, that they choose to take, will be up around 30, which they have been in the past, and that's where they were when the high school was really successful. So because of the loss of enrollment, you're not going to see a huge increase in class size, especially at the primary grades where it makes the most difference. And also Aldo has built in, how much did you build in for unforeseen for about $500,000?
About $500,000, yes.
There's about $500,000 in for staff that may have to be added. So if you end up, like right now, the kindergarten number is always unpredictable. So you have kindergarten students who are registered now, but then during the summer, you get a lot of kindergarten students registered. So if you have to, like, if you see those class sizes starting to get closer to, 23, 24, 25, then you might have to add 2 or 3 kindergarten teachers back before the school year starts. If there's a special needs classroom that starts to get too large and you need to have smaller, or you need to add a special ed classroom to keep students from going out of district, you might add 1 or 2 special ed classroom teachers. The same with bilingual. If we have more English language learners come in, you might have to add a couple of bilingual teachers. So there is contingency in the budget for that. But right now, with the loss of enrollment, especially at the secondary level, those classes will get back to really where, they kind of should be. And it's nice to have 18 and 19 in the middle school class, and you wish that was sustainable. It's just not. So you're going back to the mid-20s there.
All right, well, I asked it because I wanted to reassure people.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going to have 40 people in a classroom.
No.
I know you've got $1.75 million for unemployment and workers' compensation. To the extent we call back staff, you'll have a little leeway in the unemployment to be able to use that funding to perhaps call back staff. Well, I sent you a text message, and I hope everyone else here would. You've got my personal and professional and political backing for what you're doing at the high school. I think it needs to be done. If people disagree with me, so be it, but I think you will make a huge difference, and I think that difference has to be made. And I thank you for your commitment to the job, to the kids, to working with us, to the parents, and to the city of Brockton. And I mean that sincerely.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Councilor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilors, is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who wishes to? Councilor Mendez.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. I have done the tours at the middle schools, and they've all telling me that they do not want to go to our high school, so I appreciate you doing that. That is a fact. They're very informed. They know everything that is going on at the high school, and they're adamant that they really don't want to go there. I know we also discussed that the decline in the enrollment is a reason why we have been getting less money this year, but also the other factor, the calculation for the low-income students, if you can.
Sure.
That we were just short the 80% that required.
Yes.
Yes.
So enrollment, just to go over that first. So basically, we have lost about just under 1,300 students over the last 4 years, which calculates to $24 million. During that same time, we are up 383 staff members, 224 of them are certified staff members. So it's the largest, it is the largest number of staff that we've ever had with the Brockton Public Schools, even when we had 18 to 19 to 20,000 students. That's on me. I hired a lot. Those 383, close to 400 employees hired were approved by me. And, unfortunately, we're not able to keep that same amount with the drop in enrollment. So if you look, and it's 1,293 students down in 4 years. This year, we were second in the state. Boston lost about 648 kids. We were second to them, losing 356 students, which is about $6.5 million. The low income that Councilor Mendez discusses and brings up. So low income, there's 12 groups of low income that are considered. So we're in group 11. If you go, the highest group is group 12. If you get to group 12, you have to be at 80%, and that's written in the law. So we were at 79.59% on October 1st when that number is calculated. That is 69 students short. And if you know that we are well over 69 students more in low income. Remember how they calculate low income is students have to be connected to either a SNAP benefit or public assistance. If a family is here in legal status, they don't want to fill out paperwork. And the paperwork they have to fill out for us to make them eligible as a low-income student, first of all, it's very complicated. They do not allow us to fill that out for them. And so we were short 69 students. Legally, they cannot round up because it's written into the law as 80%, so that to the decimal point. So being that 69 students short, how they calculated the low income cost us about $6.5 million. And then obviously the loss of 356 students was a loss, $6.5 million for that.
So a little more than 6.5.
Yeah, about 6.8 million in the loss of enrollment just for 1 year. And I've said this publicly, and I said it to the school committee several times, and I've said it in all the community forums. Last year, it was recommended by the CFO and the deputy CFO. It's like, Mike, you really should think about cutting 150 staff, 100 teachers, and 50 support staff for next year. This was coming out of last year, which I'm like, that's not. I really don't feel good about doing that because of how many needs the students have. So I didn't do that last year. I didn't recommend that last year. And the reason I didn't, because I really thought enrollment would go back up. I said, I think enrollment's going to rebound, and we're going to be able to get the money back because we're coming out of COVID. We just finished our first full year of back in school. It was a tough year, as you know, our full school year back, first time. And we went down by another 356 students. So unfortunately, I rolled the dice and kept people, and I cannot do that again because that's why it's a projected $18 million deficit. If we didn't recommend these cuts that are unfortunately needed to balance the budget, obviously I wouldn't be sitting with you next year at this same time because I could be behind bars if I did that because I can't knowingly overspend the budget going into, we obviously have to balance the budget, and when you're 85% of your cost is personnel. And unfortunately, that was the only way to get to a balanced budget. I want to commend the school committee because they made sure that there were no program cuts for students. There were no programs were cut for anything that extracurricular or in-school programs. As you know, going far back when Mr. Fowler was on the school committee, fees are never charged for students to participate in sports or drama. Like most other districts, we do not charge students to take the bus like a lot of places do. So that all was kept in place, strongly supported by the school committee that there's no way they would cut programs for students. And the school committee has also been very generous over the last few years as they have put money in the budget to support students at the prom, so their prom tickets are not $90 anymore. I think they're $50 now, and yearbooks are not costing $80. They cost, I think, $40 or $50 now. So those are things that have been put in place over COVID that the school committee has been strong in supporting, that we would not cut programs for kids. But again, this is unfortunate. The last thing we needed to do was to lose staff and cut people, but if we do not get our staffing in line with our enrollment numbers, we're going to be laying off many more people next year, and I hope this will be the last time in the near future that we have to send out notices. Hopefully, if enrollment doesn't dip too much, we could probably do things through attrition and retirements, but we're hoping that we can steady enrollment. And again, that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons that I need to return to Brockton High School and stabilize where our enrollment is now. But that 69 students was really a tough pill to swallow, being at 79.59%, being that short of the 80% was tough. That $6.5 million would make a huge difference now.
Thank you so much. And I wanted you to clarify that because I didn't want people out there, the public, just thinking that we are in a situation that we are today because of any mismanagement of the school department. And that's important clarification. But in that line, 69 students, it really is heartbroken to see that we just really fell so close to being at that 80%. How can we help to make sure that this October 1st we don't fall in that same situation? Because yes, in the state, we're trying to create the pothole funding, but it's really hard when we're in that situation to try to get the money to compensate, and we're working with the mayor and the other delegations. But how can we help to make sure that we spread the word, and especially for non-English speakers, people that are afraid because of documentations and the paperwork? How can we help and assist with the nonprofits and churches to really getting the word out and making sure that going forward we can count our students properly, making sure that they're in the correct qualification and classifications of low income, which we are. There's no doubt about that. It's just making sure that we can prove it to the state and get what we are entitled to get.
Right. So we were the year before? We were lower, right? At 74? No.
We're at 75%?
So we were about 76% last year. And I think a year before that, we were close to 74%. So we have a dedicated staff member, Janice Johnson-Plumer, who goes to the churches, who works with our bilingual community liaisons. And she is the reason, along with our bilingual community liaisons, that we now see that we went from 76% to 79.59. I mean, she is everywhere. She has forums for parents. She goes to the local churches. She works closely, again, with our bilingual community facilitators to really get the word out, to make sure people know what what benefits they can receive, and being clear. And that's why it's so important to have staff members that speak the language of our families, because they're able to explain to them, listen, if you fill out this paperwork, you're getting benefits that you deserve, and you're getting benefits that will really help you and also assist your school system with getting more money. And people need to have that explained to them in a personal way. It can't be a phone call or a text message. It's got to be, people need to sit down. She spends a lot of time sitting down with families and talking them through, especially if they're here illegally, because people don't want to fill out paperwork and be exposed in the fear of what could happen. But they're able to really calm the nerves of those people and get them more and more to sign up. So we really had a big increase, and she's continuing to do that. Again, her and the team will continue to visit churches and do as much as we can before this October 1st of '23. But that's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. The final question that I have, we talked before regarding the pre-K extending their hours. Is there any hopes that that will be able to?
We want to go to full-day universal pre-K. Right now, we're not able to grow more universal pre-K classrooms. One is because we don't have the room in the elementary schools. That's the pre-K, actually. So I'm glad you asked that. So if you, from 2019 to 2023, if you look just at kindergarten, take out pre-K, if you look at enrollment, and we do not get full funding for pre-K students. So if you look from 2019 to 2023, if you just go from grades K to 12 without taking into consideration pre-K, in 2019 we were at 16,000 students, 16,619 that are just in K to 12. And that's in 2019. 2023, again, removing those pre-K, because that's been the biggest increase in enrollment. Not only, we're down 1,900 students instead of the 1,300 students, because our biggest increase has been in, as you can see, pre-K. But unfortunately, you don't get full funded for pre-K, and we're hoping that the state, they continue to talk about, universal pre-K for everyone, which is huge, especially for our students with disabilities and our English language learners, to get into school when they're 3 and 4 years old. So hopefully, right now, we don't have the funding to add classrooms because we just don't have the money for the teachers to do that. And pre-K classroom, not only do you not get full funding for a pre-K student, it is one of the most expensive classrooms to run. You need a teacher, certified pre-K teacher, and usually 2 paraprofessionals, sometimes 3. So it's in a very expensive classroom to run, more than most any other one in the district, and you don't get full funded for pre-K. So I'm hoping that, as we move forward and the state funds pre-K, there was also talk about that I've had with the school committee and Councilor Thompson and Councilor Rodriguez about a possible pre-K center where the current Shaw School is, and trying to see if there's some funding, again, from the county. I keep going back from the county, but I don't want the county to give back money, as you know, with the new, when they passed the spending bill. I know the feds are going to start clawing back some of the unspent money from ARPA and ESSER, and I hope that the county doesn't give any of that money back. So going for the Port of Chester building and maybe a new pre-K center at where the Shaw School is would be something that would be well spent, because pre-K, we really need to grow pre-K, but there's very limited space to do that. And that falls right in line with how the ESSER money is supposed to be paid, because pre-K really helps students recover from being home, stuck home with COVID, especially for children that were born during COVID and lost that socialization of being around people. And we're seeing that more and more. We are seeing more kids that we early identify for services at age 3 and 4. It's just we're having a hard time finding space for them. So it's another one of my ideas that I threw out. So I think I'm actually swinging for the fences, so I apologize to the Plymouth County Commissioners if I'm overstepping.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
No apologies necessary. $66 million, they have to do something good.
Yeah.
Councilor D'Agostino.
I apologize for going a second round. I isolated my comments to non-net earlier, and so I wanted to also just comment and ask a few questions on the net side. So one of the, and you kind of touched on this. First, I'm glad you mentioned the low-income count. I was going to ask you to talk about that, so I'm glad you already took care of that. And that turned into just such a I don't know what to call it, silliness under the Baker administration, where there was one year they changed what was considered or how to qualify as low income.
2015,
We
I
dropped
believe.
4,500 kids.
2015, actually, we
It was
lost, how many?
15.
How many kids we lost? 1,500?
We lost
6,000.
1,565.
When?
Lost.
2015.
15 to 16.
Right, right. Yeah, so it was 1,500 kids. I thought it was more than that. But anyway, that we're still low income, from low income households, but apparently that administration decided that they weren't. And again, it's been clawing back to getting that number back up.
Right.
Because they are still here and we are still educating them, despite what the former governor thought might have been the case. So anyway, I'm glad you went into that. Did you, when Councilor Minichiello and I were on the committee and we had these years where we had to unfortunately reduce staff, we also went out with a retirement incentive for longer serving staff who are at the higher ends of the salary scale. Were you able to do any of that this year?
This year, we were not able to offer that.
Was it just a lack of funding or not?
Yeah, lack of funding for, to be able to.
Retirement. Was
Yeah,
it funding?
well, a little bit of both, but funding was a big part of it.
Right, okay. And we always had varying results with that, right? Some years, a decent amount of people would take advantage of it, and other years,
Not much.
it just.
And we found out that, kind of looking into, some people were like putting off and waiting.
Hope that we were offering a package, right? Okay. I just wasn't sure if that was something you had done to, reduce staff through attrition, basically. But again, you do have to have money to work with to do that. Okay. I did also want to say, I'm glad first of all, I fully support what you're doing going up to the high school. I've talked about this. I think it's the right thing, and it really is true leadership, right? You're saying we have an issue, and you're not here from 43 Crescent Street saying, here are the directives and here's what we're going to do. You're going up there to make sure it gets done and implemented and owning it. So I really applaud that. And it is a lot, but I have also seen Mike take two roles on in the past, both deputy and superintendent, and it got a little hairy, but you pulled it off. And so I am confident that you will pull this off as well. And anytime I can support you, you know where to find me, so please reach out.
Appreciate it.
So I really do applaud the fact that you are owning this. And like I said, that's what a leader does, right? But I do want to say, and you touched on this a little bit, yes, you're going to hold the staff accountable, yourself accountable, but it is important that the parents be partners.
Big time.
Right?
Yep.
And so, when you were talking about second and third year freshmen, that's on the school department, but it's also on the parents to be better partners with you and do their part, right? We have a part as parents. I'm a parent, you're a parent. We have a part we have to play too. So we have to, make sure that, it takes a village, right?
It takes all of us. And I want to say, I'm not saying at all everything should be on the parents because they need our support.
Right.
Because there are several times that, the parent will get to my office because the principal say, I've met with this parent, I've met with this student. But sometimes I'll meet with the parents and say, you know what, I wish sometimes our communication needs to be a lot better. Like some parents, some parents don't have the capacity to always be checking the parent portal because they're working 2 or 3 jobs. So we need to do a better job of communicating earlier to parents, right away in September. If you see the students start to fall and really struggle, you need to have those meetings soon
Right.
and not just hope that the parent is looking at a progress notice or looking at the parent portal to see if their child's passing or doing their homework and going to class. Because again, some people work in 2 or 3 jobs, so we have to do a better job supporting them and making sure they come in and understand what the issues are and how they can help support, making sure that their child's getting to school on time, making sure they're held accountable for going to class. So our communication needs to be better. And until you can make sure, like, you always, you want to obviously hold parents accountable too as a partner in helping make sure that their child's successful. But we have to make sure we put supports in place to be able to make sure they're able to do that as well. So that's why it's going to be everyone. And you make a good point. And, so there will be hard conversations. There'll be hard conversations that are going to have to be had with staff, with students, and with parents. Because, again, that's the only way we're going to make this change and bring back the high school where it needs to be. It's got to be everyone. But there will be tough conversations, yes.
Yeah, well, and I was also going to say something that you can do is making sure that the parents are informed early.
Correct.
When there's an issue, and then get regular reporting as to how
Updates.
things are going,
Yep.
right? Because, if they don't know that there's an issue, then, and then also, and I think this would be helpful, and I'm sure you would do it, but I'll say it anyway. Sometimes, we may not necessarily know, okay, so what is it we need to do at home, right?
Right.
And so.
We have to provide resources to assist.
Helping with resources.
Yep.
So that when we say to parents, okay, we need you to be a partner, and by the way, if you need some resources to help you with that, here are the resources, and here's what we would,
Correct.
what this would look like with us working together too. So you can definitely provide some support in that way too, which I'm sure you will.
Yeah, and you also have to make sure it doesn't have to always be done with the heavy hands. Like,
Right.
Okay, you're not doing this, this, and that, so now we got to find a way to take you to court, or that's not improving anybody's relationship.
Nobody wins.
Unless, obviously, there's clear neglect that has to be reported, but, we have to, again, do a better job of getting parents in earlier, making them part of this earlier. And, for example, I'll give you a quick example. I know I'm going on, but I'll be quick. So Principal Burns is going to send me the 20 students in each building that have been failing often, who cut several classes and have done that now for all of this year. And I will be meeting with every one of them and their parents before school opens in September to say,
We got to come up with a plan.
we got to come up with a plan for September. What do you need? What support can we give you? And so that will be done, because you have to let the expectations be known early that, this is what happened last year. It's not going to happen this year. Because if I allow it to happen, I'm failing that kid. And that's what you're failing that student if you're not doing something to change what they're doing in school. Then you're allowing them to fail, allowing them to drop out. And like I said before, that's discrimination, because now you are not doing anything to bring that student back in, and not holding them or me or the parent accountable to make sure that student graduates.
Right. And the other thing I think is important too is to make sure that, and this goes again with partnering with parents, there may be things happening beyond.
Correct. We need to know that.
The walls
Right.
of the school that are affecting that student and their ability to
Correct.
perform. And
that's what we need to know. If bullying, anything that's keeping them from coming to class, sometimes they really struggling in a class of math. So it's math. Like, I was awful in math, and maybe that's the class I want to cut every day because I can't do it. So that's where we need to get you extra help. Or what's going on at home that's hard to get some in the school. We need to know that, but it's got to be better communication.
Right, and there could be a struggle going on at home, and I'll say it, I've told you about this before, my senior year of high school, I was doing terribly. And they probably just thought I was a bad kid until they got in touch with my parents and found out that my mother was dying of cancer, and that's what I was going home to every night.
Right.
So, and it changed the approach. So again, when we find out what's going on in these kids' lives outside of school, that would help, again, partnering with the parents, and also might give you the ability to, okay, now we got to approach this in a different way, because we just learned there's this huge thing going on in this family that is obviously having a profound effect, So, anyway,
Excuse me, is there anything else on the budget?
Sorry. Okay, never mind.
Thank you. Anyone else on the budget? Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all, counselors. I appreciate your support as always.
I want to thank the members of the school committee who are here to support their budget tonight. Tony Rodriguez, Tim Sullivan, Judy Sullivan, Joyce Asek, and Cynthia Rivas Mendez. Thank you for being here.
The next department is the War Memorial. Invited James Plouffe, Superintendent of Buildings.
That was a good conversation.
Good evening, Madam Chair,
Good evening,
councilors.
Mr. Clarkson.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for having us here, Madam Chair. I'm here for the War Memorial budget, which, as of last year, was incorporated into our general budget. So this year is the same. We're not asking for any budgetary monies in this particular budget.
Okay. Councilors, questions? Why don't you continue on with your public property?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this past year has been an interesting year with public property. We've been working on several different projects. We've been working with some of the councilors and the administration on the public safety building, which will be started momentarily. Right now, we're working on the demolition and abatement of the building over on the old high school. We are, in the past year, we did, with the help of several councilors, created the inspectional services, which will occur on July 1st, where the Board of Health inspectors will now be under my control. And this will impact my budget this year coming up in several ways. One, we are hiring a deputy building commissioner who will work underneath me and help support my role as the commissioner. We're also hiring a chief of inspections who will oversee the inspectional services staff, albeit the Board of Health inspectors and also some of the inspections from the building wiring and plumbing inspector side. In addition, we're also looking to hire an admin 3 in our office to help support the Board of Health inspectors and the additional administrative work that will occur with both the Board of Health inspectors and also weights and measures, which will be incorporated into the inspectional services also. In addition, the workload, unfortunately, due to the Brockton Hospital disaster a few months ago, has caused my electrical inspector staff to really have a lot more work to do. In addition to that, there's a lot of solar work going on within the city, so we felt it necessary to add a 3rd wiring inspector to be able to incorporate or do all those inspections throughout the year. One thing to note about our this past year, and the CFO can mention it also, but our estimated receipts for miscellaneous cash was estimated about $3 million, I believe, and this year we've doubled that to about $6 million. So we brought in twice as much as what we estimated we were collecting in permit fees and license fees. And that, thankfully, will help support the requests that I have for the new staff coming on. My overtime we're requesting a large percentage of overtime, but that overtime will incorporate a number of things. First, we are moving from the Parks Commission over to our department, the pool equipment and pool supplies, and also the overtime, which would usually come out of the Parks Department, into our department, because our staff are the pool certified, or the certified pool operators for the city. In addition, we have increased hours at the library during the week and on weekends, and a lot more weekend events occurring here at City Hall. That's increasing our custodial staff. Also, our public property staff are performing a lot more projects these days with, unfortunately, lesser people over the year than we had years ago. And a lot of these projects are occurring during off hours because we can't operate necessarily when people are working. And also, for some strange reason, we've seen an increase in cars hitting buildings over the past few years, and our inspectors are going out a lot more for overtime calls in the middle of the night when those occur. So those are some of the examples, some of the reasons why we're asking for a larger increase in overtime. With that, I will offer it up to any questions that the council might have.
Thank you. Councilors? Councilor Farwell.
Just very quickly, once we merge the inspectional staff into the new inspectional services department, I guess this is actually a question for the CFO. Is this another situation where we will take the money appropriated to public property for the for the health department and move it into public property? Because ultimately, Mr. Plouffe is going to be responsible for overseeing that and being accountable, I would think, for the appropriation and the expenditures for the inspectors. Am I on the right path here?
Yes, Counselor, absolutely. So as we discussed the other night with the health department, the dynamic will be similar here. And our philosophy is, because we do anticipate some additional changes to the health department with the work that you're doing to form a Health and Human Services department, it seemed most efficient to us to come back to you and amend this FY24 budget after all of that work is done. And at that time, we'll come to you with changes that reflect all of that legislative work.
Okay, now, the reason I ask that is that we're going to come in tomorrow night and we're going to have all these different budgets. If you leave the full appropriation requested with, for example, the health department, you've basically given them authority to spend that amount of money. Would you come in with a rescission budget? Is that how it works, to transfer the money? Or just give me the mechanics on that.
So what we will do, actually, at that time, say for those inspectors, we will come in and ask you to transfer money from, say, salaries and wages and from other lines in the budget that support those people, and transfer that to the public property department with some detail. But because it's a transfer, there'll be no reason to rescind the appropriation to the health department, because you'll be actually reducing that departmental budget by that amount. And the act of the transfer then increases it to the public property department.
Okay. And lastly, if you know, Mr. Plouffe, have we finalized the agreement, the union collective bargaining agreement, to accomplish what we're doing with the inspectional services department coming into you and having the health inspectors all part of that group that you're going to oversee, you and the deputy commissioner and the chief of inspections?
As far as I'm aware, we have not. We are going to be having a meeting in the next couple weeks prior to July 1st with the mayor and the law office to discuss how we're going to proceed with that, those issues.
All right. If you know, is there any pushback, or are people pretty much on board with this? Or?
I have not heard of any pushback. It seems to be positive from everybody I've talked to. I'm not sure what the actual Board of Health inspectors feel, but everybody I've been talking to has been positive.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening.
So just a couple quick questions. And I think you said something about permits during your opening speech, but I'm just looking at the number of building permits, and I see your 22 actuals were about 3,200. We've got a significant 800 projected drop in fiscal year 2023, and it looks like we're going back up to maybe what was prior the norm. Could you explain why we're looking at about 800 drop in permits, and then now expecting about 1,000 increase in permits coming up?
The reasons behind it, I do not know, but we are seeing an increase in permits. Everything from pools and solar permits to major renovations and new buildings. We're seeing a significant number of projects come through, and it's staggering. I didn't expect this year to have as many, but it looks like we're going to be exceeding that even.
So then what we projected in fiscal year 2023 was exceeded greatly, you're saying?
Yes.
Than the 24 that was projected?
Yes.
Okay. And then because of what we're seeing now, we're projecting something similar this coming fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that. And then just looking at your demolition budget, I know, it looks like in 22, pretty minimal at almost $10,000. Then I know we had about, 5, 6 buildings demolished in fiscal year 23. But you're dropping down to about 50,000 next year. Is it less buildings need to come down, or can you explain why that big drop?
We haven't had the need to, well, recently, actually within the past 2 weeks we have, but we haven't had a large need to go after dangerous buildings. We've taken care of a lot of them in the past years, and we're finding a lot more responsible homeowners when it comes to fires and such, that they take care of their own. For example, on Tripou Street, there was a fire a few months ago, and the owner and the insurance company took care of that demolition. Even though we were prepared to go forward and do that, we didn't have to. So we're finding more responsive homeowners. Unfortunately, 2 weeks ago, we had about 2 weeks ago, we had a fire on South Street.
Right.
And we had to demolish that building. The owner wasn't going to be able to do it. The insurance company, a weird insurance situation. So we demolished it. We're going to be using the revolving fund, which has enough funds in it to pay for that. And then we're going to bill the insurance company and also put a lien on it, on the property, and hopefully recover all of it.
And we have two demolition funds? This one out of your public property budget, and then the abandoned buildings also. Do we do demolition through that fund as well, or?
We do, but actually I would say there's 3 accounts in that case. We have a revolving demolition account that the council
Right.
reauthorizes every year, and then we have the budgetary line item, which is usually less than what we usually have in the other accounts. And we also have the vacant abandoned building fund, which we're able to expend, I believe, up to $250,000 a year for items related to vacant buildings. So if a vacant building needs to be demolished, has a fire, and there's no owner there, we can use that fund to take care of that demolition. Of course, leaning that property afterwards.
Right, so the vacant abandoned building, specifically for vacant abandoned buildings, our revolving fund is for what compared to what this line item is for?
It would be the same thing. The revolving item, the revolving account, as I put it when we did the re-upping of it a month ago, is pretty much a backup to whatever I have in the budgetary items. If this budget is decreased because of whatever reason, the revolving account, which is always re-upped every time the lien is paid off, will back me up for a more expensive demolition.
All right, or emergency situations that may arise. Okay.
Correct.
Counselor, if I could just jump in and give some texture to what Jim is sharing with you. He's correct, and one of the reasons why we recommended reducing that budget line item, there is a healthy balance in the demolition revolving fund of about $163,000, and the vacant and abandoned building fund, which is actually the source of some of the new positions that Jim is proposing, has just shy of $1 million in it.
Okay, great. And just, you're going to be taking on some additional responsibilities, the pools, inspectional services. So, your plate's going to get a lot fuller, and so we know you can handle it. We appreciate you stepping up. Just lastly on that matter, you do have, I just want to speak of the 2 proposed positions of Deputy Commissioner and Chief for Inspections. Now, I know you really can't, advertise until we pass this budget where those positions are funded, but what's your expectation to be able to quickly fill those two positions?
Well, we went through the exercise of determining whether or not we had excess funds this year based on vacancies that we had at the beginning of the year to be able to fund those positions this year with anticipation of being able to fund them again for next year. So we went forward and advertised, and right now we have set up interviews for next week for six different people for those two positions.
Wow. Wow, that's great. Okay, great. Then, then hopefully you fill those two positions because, and it's great that you can do that this early so that come this fiscal year, they can hit the ground running. And great, Commissioner, we're looking forward to great things this year, and, we're here to support you in this new endeavor. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Plouffe, how are you?
Very good, thank you, Councilor.
My question is going to go to our other Aquaria program called the Rock Stadium.
Yes.
My other Aquaria, I got two of them, so. I see that this year you're spending, last year we, through the adopted budget of FY23, we spent $53,100 on the stadium, purchase of services for the stadium. This year, it's proposed to $155,000. And the largest jump is on this other contract services. What does it exactly mean?
Okay.
Contract services.
Thank you, Council, for the question. First, a little clarity on the increase. And it says it's a 300% increase, I believe, of some sort, from 55 to 150, somewhere around there. And the request last year during our budget hearings was for $255,000, or about there. The budget cuts came through for $200,000. So we only received $55,000 in our budget last year, or about there. We came back to the council, asked for additional funds for the elevator and for the sprinkler system. The reason it looks like 300% because we were only given the 55,000 or around that last year's budget, and now we're asking for 150, which is less than what our ask was last year, but looks like it's triple of what we got. So it's a little, the numbers look a little funny there because of that request. The other contract services would be anything that we contract out. We have a plumbing company come in, and every year they open up the system, and then in the spring, in the fall, they close down the system, winterize it. That's close to $10,000 just alone. For that company to do that. We have other maintenance. We went through and renovated or fixed, really. It wasn't really a renovation, it was more like fixing the suites this year for the tenants, because they had been damaged over the years and never fixed before. So we spent a lot of time and money this year fixing those. Just everyday expenses of maintaining a building is what those are for.
So what exactly does this tenant pay for? I mean, if we pay for the lights, we pay for the water, we pay for renovations, we pay for the work that needs to be done in winterizing, summerizing the pipes, what does exactly the tenant pay for in that stadium?
I'd have to defer to the CFO for that.
The tenant pays a lease payment, and they are responsible for general maintenance while during the baseball season. So they have control of the stadium while the baseball season is going on, and have some just general responsibilities for, as you would as a tenant, for cleaning up, keeping the stadium in good order, but generally,
paper towels in the bathroom, toilet paper, that kind of stuff. Right?
Under the current lease, the city has most of the responsibility for maintaining the building, as we would maintain a building like this.
Troy, but at least this building, the public of Brockton has access to this building. We meet here on a regular basis. We conduct city business in here on a regular basis. The citizens of Brockton have access to this building. The citizens of Brockton do not have access to that stadium. We've been trying to get in touch with them now for about 6 months to try to figure out something to do with concerts that we wanted, some events that we want to do in that stadium. It's unavailable for the community, for community purposes. So how does this make any sense to anybody? I mean, you could have a kindergarten education to realize that this is totally a no-brainer in terms of what this city gets from that stadium. There's this infatuation with the hopes that the Field of Dreams will come back to Brockton. It's not coming back. And all we're doing is spending money. I mean, what do we get, $25,000 a year from them?
The lease.
And a lease?
Approximately, yes.
So we get $25,000 from them, and we spend $300,000. Is that, I mean, I know I have a, college, whatever, but, my high school math actually says that $25,000 is a lot less than $300,000. And the benefits do not equate what we're getting out of this. So if they're not working with the community, it's not a building, it's not a city building. But yet we're putting all the resources into it as if it was one of the city buildings. And it's not accessible to the community because we have absolutely no access to it. How does that make any sense? We're sitting here, debating whether or not we're going to do something with the quarry or try to figure out, whether we're getting a good bang for our buck, and we continue to pour money into this facility. I think we just spent a whole bunch of money on that scoreboard. Scoreboard that our kids don't get to use, or our community doesn't get to use. Does that make any sense? I mean, why do we keep going on with this fantasy of supporting this private institution, in the sense that is the Rocks, for the benefit of this community, where they had an opening day, maybe they had 20 people there, maybe, on their opening day. So what exactly benefits are we getting for our dollars, for our tax dollars, out of that stadium?
Councilor, the question you asked me was a factual question based on the amount of money that we spend and what we're responsible for under the current lease. What you're asking now is for a value judgment. And so I have stated to this body before that I believe one of the options we should consider is actually selling the stadium and the property and putting it in private hands and creating a revenue source for the city. It's one of the options we may consider. But in the interim, while we still own it, if our option someday is to sell that, then I do believe that it has to be in a condition that there will be some value to it. And so I do think we have a responsibility, because it is a public facility, and we have a responsibility to the tenant, however upside down those numbers are, to provide a facility that's in good working order. So this is something that all of us, elected and appointed officials alike, inherited, but we still have a responsibility to maintain it.
I understand that, but we're not putting scoreboards on any of the parks that we have in the city. We're putting it for the Rocks. It's not coming to Salisbury Park or any of these other parks that we have. Why is it that we're beautifying this facility for the Rocks when our benefits aren't really all that great?
Well, I will say, and I do believe, and I'm saying this based on my general knowledge. Obviously, I don't manage the stadium, but I do believe our there, and the current tenant has made some efforts with some success at getting other sports teams in other sports interested in playing there. So this new owner has been here for a fairly short amount of time, has been very collaborative and cooperative, and I think has demonstrated both a willingness and an aptitude for maximizing some of the revenue at the stadium.
But Troy, what I'm saying to you is that every time he allows an outside entity to come in, let's say a team to come in and play, it's on our lights, on our electricity, our water that's being used, the cities. Again, we're not getting any benefits from it. It benefits the tenant. We're not getting anything. If they have activities in that stadium every single day of the week, the city doesn't benefit from it. It benefits the tenant. And we still pay their light bills to keep the place all lit up, and we pay the water bills for the facility, and when the things break down, we fix the breakdown. So where is the benefits for the city? To be honest with you, I wish they did, they played their baseball game from whatever they played, turn off the lights, turn off the water, come back whenever the next game is, turn on the lights, turn off the water, at least save the taxpayers some money. Because we're not saving anything. And we cannot get in touch with them to do anything as they promised us here, that the place would be available for community use. That was said very clear here when we were deciding on the elevator money. Because again, what benefits are we getting? Why do we need to fix elevators if it does not benefit the community? If it benefits the 20 people that go to the game, it's not benefiting us. So my whole thing is, they either make themselves available or we're going to chop this up. They're either going to make the place available like they said that they were going to, or we're going to chop this up. Because we can't continue to supplement a private entity, the only one in the city that we do that to. We don't provide lights to WB Mason or some of these other organizations in the community. We don't give them free water. As a matter of fact, the cemetery, we're charging $16,000 for stormwater, But yet this facility gets to use whatever water it wants to use, whenever it wants to use, and we're glad to continue to pay the light bills for this organization. It just can't continue, Troy.
So I wasn't aware, Counselor, of your inability, and their inaccessibility, I should say. I don't regularly speak with those folks, but I know Jim does, and I know that they have an open line of communication with the mayor. I will ensure.
I will forward you the text that I got from several individuals looking to get into.
Oh yeah, no, I don't doubt that that's a truthful statement at all. But now that you've made me aware of it, I will make sure myself that they are responsive.
In the meantime, I'll forward you that so you know where I'm coming from with this stuff, because to me it makes absolutely no sense. And they should not have more events in the place, because the more events they have, the more costly it is for the taxpayers of this city.
Understood. Information, Counselor. There are other counselors who are interested in just these issues.
I'm done.
We can file a resolve. We can arrange a meeting. This is something that really is worth looking into.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
And Madam Chair and Councilor Rodriguez, when you decide and when you're deciding on cuts tomorrow night, I do want you to please consider the fact that it's not just the stadium, it's the stadium complex, and currently the Council on Aging is occupying the Shaw Center, and we do need funds to keep them up and running. Thank you.
Who's next? Councilor Texera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent Jim Pluff.
Thank you, Councilor.
Just going back to your post for the position that you got for Deputy Commissioner of the Building Department and Chief of Inspect. You say you got about 6 interview. Is that what I?
Yes. Well, I have 2 applicants.
Oh, you got 2 applicants.
I have 2 applicants that have applied for both jobs. And then I have, for the Deputy Commissioner position, I have 3, 4, 5 interviews for the deputy commissioner and 3 interviews for the chief of inspections. But 2 of them in each, they're applied for both, so we're going to be interviewing for both positions.
Are they all Brockton residents?
No.
Out of the 5 that applied for the deputy commission of the building, how many are Brockton residents?
1.
Just 1. And with the chief of inspect?
Correct, 1 also.
Also 1.
And that's the same individual.
So he applied for both?
Yes.
He wants to make sure he on one of them?
Correct.
Okay, understood.
Oh, my mistake. There's a second, one of the ones that applied for the chief of inspections, he's also a Brockton resident. Remember that now. There's two Brockton residents going for the chief of inspections.
Oh, you got 2?
Yeah.
Do we give preference to Brockton?
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you, Councilor.
I'm sorry. I said, do we give a preference to Brockton residents first, or?
So the way the ordinance is written and the way I'm approaching this, the position is an appointed position by the mayor and confirmed by you as the council. So it's going to be interviews and recommendations to the mayor. But the way the ordinance is written is if the qualifications are equal, preference should be given to the city resident, if they're equal.
All right, thank you. Got it.
Councilor Lally?
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, good morning, almost. Good evening, Mr. Superintendent.
Good evening, Councilor.
Night 3. So I had a couple of questions. Surprisingly, 1 or 2 will be about the stadium. I do apologize. But something came up that I just thought was important to ask about, and that is, the talk about the new owner of the Rocks working to get more people into the stadium to, play games or have events or do whatever. Some of those are going to be like Brockton High, where, it's high school kids playing baseball, but some of those I imagine are private concerns that are going to use it sort of like a venue. Who would get the rent for that?
I don't have the specifics on that. We can get the specifics to you through the contract that we have, or the agreement with them. But there is a revenue sharing for certain parts of the year. I believe we have rights from somewhere in the fall to somewhere in the spring, over the winter. But then we have sharing. Some kind of sharing agreement. But I can get that specific to you later on.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. This is just something that, that came up in the conversation, so I don't expect that to be, immediately accessible. But, yeah, that, I believe there was some kind of a sharing agreement, but I don't know the full agreement. But that, is a pretty, valid question as to, if they're already making out, pretty well, how well are we actually getting any of it? The other thing is, I understand this isn't, I don't know if this is to you as much as it is to, the CFO, or really probably, the mayor or even the council. You have a lot of buildings that you're looking after. And the department inherited the stadium and the Shaw's Center, which sort of added to the pile. Yet, for a very long time, the actual roster or the amount of people within public properties who have been tasked with handling all these buildings has not changed. Regardless of what we wind up doing with the stadium, I do agree that, examining selling the stadium does hold some promise, because it really is a strange situation for us. And it's something where we keep going back and finding the same results. But I think regardless of that, we should evaluate, the staffing, because I believe both you and your predecessor mentioned to me that it's a lot to cover. A lot to cover with, people who are doing, as the mayor would say, yeoman's work. But it's, just a lot of ground.
I agree, Councilor, wholeheartedly. I can't say enough for Jim Burgess, my shop supervisor, and his crew. Paul Hardiman, my carpenter, Derek Hackins, my other carpenter, my Adriano, and my new electrician, Andre, Earl, and Danny. I mean, they all do yeoman's work and what they do. And they are asked on a consistent basis to do more and more work and have, they're doing things a lot on overtime, as I asked for the increase in overtime. But I feel bad for them because that overtime is meant to be for their families when they're home. So they're doing a lot of work on overtime and with their low numbers. We do contract out a lot for different things. I'm going to be working on some maintenance agreements with the procurement office because we have certain thresholds under procurement laws, $10,000 for good business practices, and we're almost always exceeding those with the rising costs in plumbing and fire protection and all these different trades. I'm going to be looking at maintenance agreements to spread over 3 years. If I had my staff, if I had a larger staff, we might be able to cover that all, but not necessarily all of it. But whereas my building inspectors and wiring inspectors and plumbing inspectors are an income-producing group of people, the public property staff is not. They would be the ones spending the money. So it's always a give and take. It's you're weighing the money, and I'd love to have 100 people under me working construction, and we'd have things working great. I don't know if that financially is feasible.
Right. No, but it is just something to sort of highlight the amount of obligation that the department has been tasked with, to the amount of manpower it's been given for that objective. I'm sure that Councilor Rodriguez would agree that maybe we can co-sponsor something to swap the desal plant for the stadium. But for now, I think it is worth maybe some kind of a working group or a resolve in the future, just as a something to reevaluate, maybe for the the committee that deals with the economics of the city anyway. But that is really what I have. Thank you, Madam President.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Superintendent, and pass my appreciation on to your teams.
Well, thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Councilor Farwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to be brief. Mr. Plouffe, as you know, I wrote the ordinance on inspectional services. When that program is fully functioning, it will make a tremendous difference in the city for the quality of life for people, for the image of the city. Now, I have this terrible habit, and I blame my mother. I have to tell it like it is. I don't care, and I'm saying this jokingly, I don't care if Madam President's fifth cousin applies. I don't care if Councilor Lally's uncle applies. Pick the best people, you and the mayor, for that job. I don't care who they are. I don't care who they know. These are career positions. They're going to exert an enormous amount of influence over how this city kicks off the inaugural piece of inspectional services. I'm aware of political pressure. I don't care. The public is paying for these positions, and I want to make sure that we have people in place who exhibit the kind of leadership skills, temperament, personality, ability to work as a team member that will get this thing off the ground. And since it is a mayoral appointment confirmed by us, just be aware, if I presume it'll come in before January. I never predict elections or re-elections, but if I'm here, you know I will be no shrinking violet bringing out the qualities of a proposed appointee, because this has got to be done right. And I'm really passionate about this, as you can tell. So you've got my backing to pick the right person. And you know what? If you don't like any of the applicants, I'd rather delay the inauguration of the program and re-advertise the positions, because you never know who may be contemplating a career change or doing something different. So I think you know where I'm coming from. And Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. And Madam Chair and Council Fowl, just to let you know, I put assembled, with the advice of the mayor, a panel of 5, including myself, to do those interviews. So it'll be Cindy Merrill, the Chief of Staff, Chris Ships, Assistant Human Resources Director, Amir from DEI, and Deputy Williams from the Fire Department. And the 5 of us will be the interview team that will be discussing each interview.
Well, please pass on my comments to them, and they know my bad habit of telling it like it is, too. So, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? You noticed he's no shrinking violet in a violet shirt.
Thank you.
So I just have a few quick things.
Certainly.
Your tuition and training have gone up quite a bit, 236%.
Yes.
So explain to me why.
Sure. The mayor has made a mandate that our staff be trained and in any way possible. And I'm actually maxed out this year on the increase for our tuition and training from last year, which was really a really good thing in my eyes. That means I have more educated people working for me. A lot of my inspectors go to classes that are mandated. So my plumbing, wiring, and building inspectors are mandated to have continuing education. My public property staff are mandated to have continuing education. So those positions are going to classes. And the classes, obviously, everything else is going up in price, so is the attendance of these classes. So there's going to be increases just due to that. But we're also trying to increase the availability for education to everybody in my office, whether it be the custodians or the admin staff, to go back to class or learn a new skill that's going to be helping them in their positions. So the increase is to be going towards training of our staff to make them more educated.
Okay. And how about part-time salaries, up 140%, more than double?
Yes, since last year, and I believe the CFO may be able to talk more specifically about this, but I believe part-time salaries is going to be used to pay for my ZBA, the board members that are paid. The chair is $300 a meeting. I believe each member is $200 a meeting.
Madam Chairman, if I could expand on that. Jim is correct. You will see that in any budget that works with a board that is now compensated based on actions that you've taken. And all of those departments, that compensation will show up in part-time salaries.
Okay. And last year, Mr. Plouffe, you mentioned a master key issue is being explored?
Yes. And I am still exploring that master key issue. It's a slow process because I've inquired with a local locksmith to assist me in trying to figure out what the bounds financially are for a master key system. And the master key system, if no one's aware, is one super grand master key for all buildings. Then each individual building would have their own separate key. So the Grand Master could get in all the buildings, then the master key for the building would be given to the department head or the person who's responsible for that building. And underneath that, if there's individual departments, it flows down like a tree. So then the lowest part would be the average worker who comes in and works during the day. They would be able to enter their office, but they couldn't enter custodial, they couldn't enter other people's offices, or they couldn't enter another building. So we're exploring that master key system. It's probably going to be, when it's completed, it's probably going to be an expensive proposition. I think the school department did this a few years ago with all their schools, but it's going to vastly decrease the number of keys on my custodian's keychain if we can accomplish that.
Okay, and you're still working on it?
We are still working on it, yes.
Do you see completion in the coming months?
I wouldn't see completion this year. And what may happen, since a master key system can be worked from the top down, is we can add additional buildings on. So I might start small with one building and then gradually grow up to include the War Memorial, include the Council on Aging, if we still have the Shaw Center, DPW facilities, and then branch out to parks and other buildings. But I may start small because that kind of system allows us to start small and then just branch out.
My last question is the basement at the War Memorial Building still flooding?
I am not aware of any flooding anymore down there. We are storing a lot of stuff down there, including COVID kits and stuff from the ARPA and CARES Act. So I'm not aware of significant flooding down there.
Good, good. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next department is procurement. Invited Michael Morris, Chief Procurement Officer.
Good evening, Mr. Morris.
Good evening, Madam Chair, and good evening, councilors. The Procurement Department is charged with enforcing the procurement laws of Massachusetts. They were created in the 1980s in an attempt to foster competition and prevent favoritism in municipal purchasing. FY23 has been an extremely busy year for us, from annual purchases of goods and services to dozens of capital projects and large multi-million-dollar ARPA-funded construction projects. Some examples of these projects include the asbestos abatement of the Keefe Center, roof replacement at Fire Station Number 2, roof replacement at the main library, the War Memorial renovation project, the Council on Aging addition, and the Cosgrove Pool modernization project, which would be available next week. In addition, we also developed and processed over 130 contract documents. I wouldn't have been able to juggle all these projects without the assistance of my staff, so I'd like to publicly thank them. The budget that you have in front of you is pretty much similar to last year's, except for a couple of line items with very minor increases. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for procurement, councilors? Thank you, good.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice night.
Well done, Mike. Thanks for coming in. Madam Clerk?
Next department is library. Invited Paul Engel, Director.
Good evening, Mr. Director.
Good evening, Councilor. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that Lisa O'Donnell is here. She's the Vice Chair of the Library Board of Trustees. Good evening, councilors. Good evening, Council President Nicastro, wherever you are. It's my honor to come before you to highlight the Brockton Public Library and to discuss the FY24 budget. We all know how vital our public libraries are as information technology and community centers on a national level, and we all recognize that the Brockton Public Library is an exemplar of this exact ideal. To that end, I would like to point out 3 areas where the Brockton Public Library works in partnership with various organizations in Brockton and around the Commonwealth. Partnerships with state agencies. Last year, we received $50,000 from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, which we used to purchase a mobile planetarium, which celebrated its 1-year anniversary this past Saturday. Here are some stats from that year, from this past year. 1,537 planetarium programs, attendees, 91 different shows presented, of which there were 52 classes of K through 12 students, and 63% of those total numbers of attendees were K through 5 students. Recently, the library received $75,000 from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. These funds are unrestricted and not tethered to any fiscal year. This gives us another opportunity to invest in assets that will be valued and useful for our community. Partnerships with nonprofits. 2 groups have approached us recently to offer technology and education to 2 very different populations. a Boston-based nonprofit called Building Our Lives Together as One will be offering a technology basics curriculum for our seniors. This program, titled Tech Goes Home, will run for 6 weeks and have a total cohort of 27 people divided into 2 classrooms. Upon successful completion of this program, participants receive a Chromebook, mouse, headphones, and hotspots with 1 year's service. The second group, Children Across America, who currently are in Milford but looking to relocate their base to Brockton, will be teaching a program titled Girls Love to Code, which focuses on teaching coding basics to girls K through 5. We will be utilizing the East Branch for this program, and this program will begin in the fall. Partnering through art. Since COVID, the library has commissioned 6 works of art, including a COVID memorial mosaic statue that is featured in this year's budget book. This is part of a larger project initiated by the Library Board of Trustees to purchase regional contemporary art in order to make the artwork we display more reflective of the Brockton community today. You may have also noticed the Follow Me to Art campaign on the BAT buses. This is a partnership between the Brockton Public Library, the Fuller Craft Museum, and Brockton Arts, and it is intended to highlight Brockton's diverse arts communities and 3 physical locations where this art can be experienced. But life is not always about art. Infrastructure improvements this year will include IT upgrades, thanks to Ted Medeiros and the IT staff, and a roof replacement project at Maine, thanks to the work and dedication of Mayor Sullivan, CFO Clarkson, Mike Morris, and Jim Pluff. The proposed fiscal year 24 budget is a largely level-funded budget. You will notice that there are 3 proposed positions. 2 full-time senior library assistants to act as floaters who can bolster our branch staff. Branch hours increased from 18 total hours a week in 2016 to 64 total hours a week in 2023. That is a roughly 72% increase in hours, and we have accomplished that without increasing our staff size. The part-time STEM position is a proposal to have somebody learn the ways of the makerspace under the mentorship of Pat Monteith and prepare for the day when Pat moves on from her volunteer duties. I want to make sure that the makerspace services continue without interruption. The current open positions as represented in the budget book are a little stale. We currently have 3 open MLS positions and 1 part-time library assistant position open. We are still challenged hiring MLS positions due to the restrictions of residency and the low base salary for an MLS coming into Brockton. The increases you'll see in salary, shift differential, and educational incentives are due to workforce shifts from part-time to full-time employees and 3 proposed positions. Finally, the library's 5-year strategic plan will end in 2025. We will be convening a focus groups and committees, as well as selecting a consultant to work with us to create a new 5-year strategic plan. All libraries in Massachusetts require a strategic plan on file with the state in order to be eligible for grant funding. That's the conclusion of my statement. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
You, Mr. Director. Mr. Clarkson, you had something real quick?
Yes, thank you, Councilor. Just a follow-on specifically for this budget. Mr. Engel is correct that this is essentially a level-funded budget. When you look at the line item budget on page 310, it appears as though there's approximately 13% increase. So I want to explain that briefly to you. The library gets directed state aid every year, so it's funding from the Commonwealth specifically for libraries. Typically, the way that's been handled in the past is that that money has gone into a fund and the expenses were billed directly to that fund. The way it occurs now, as you'll see on page 126 under revenue, it shows those library funds of $308,000 coming in. And the expenses that normally would be off the books are now reflected in this budget. So that's, I think, a best practice for a couple of reasons. One, for transparency purposes, it actually allows you to, in the budget you're approving, see all of the revenue and all of the expenses of the public library. It also allows us to demonstrate total spending that's higher, and that's good because in order to remain certified from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, we have to demonstrate a certain level of financial commitment every year. And so this funding that we were already spending allows us to demonstrate we're making a commitment to that continued funding. So the operations are the same, but we're reflecting how that money is spent differently.
Thank you. Councilors? Councilor Minicello.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. So where are you with regard to the assistant library director position?
The assistant library director position has been filled.
Okay.
We had a search for it. Search committee contained Amir, Sydney, myself, Jocelyn Meek from the trustees. The selection was Kevin Nascimento, who is our head of technical services.
So this one says vacant, so I should mark it as
Correct,
filled.
that's why I said
Okay,
the
perfect.
data you have there is a little bit old.
Okay. And the circulation supervisor,
That is still vacant.
and how far along are you, I guess, with it? Whereabouts are you?
We had a search for that. We had applicants. We did interview 2 qualified applicants with library degrees, and both of them withdrew due to residency and/or salary.
Okay. And the senior library assistant circulation department?
That's been filled, sir.
Filled, okay. And reference librarian adults?
Reference librarian, same scenario. That's been open, still is open. We've received applications. We've interviewed applicants. They have refused the job due to residency and/or salary.
Okay. So when the ads go out, doesn't it say subject to residency?
Yes.
Okay.
People apply anyway.
Okay. Just to practice an interview or something. Okay. And then the principal library assistant tech service department?
That's been filled as well.
Okay. And then the 2 grade level 2s? Grade level 2?
Those are the proposed that I explained in my statement.
Okay. So those are not yet advertised?
They are not yet approved.
Okay.
They are proposed.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Farwell?
Good evening.
Hello.
Does the MBLC provide funding for either the renovation, purchase, or operations of a building?
They can, there is a grant a construction grant, but the last I knew, there's about an 8 to 10 year wait period on that grant.
Okay.
But otherwise, what they provide to us is state aid to public libraries that Troy mentioned, which we can use we largely fund our programming through the state aid. So we don't specifically use it for the buildings themselves.
Well, once in a while, I think about what I'd like to see, and some people may think it's not a dream, it's a hallucination, but the mayor has mentioned an interest in acquiring the old Christos Conference Center.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if that could become the East Side Library Cultural and Learning Center.
I am in. Let's do it.
Well, I know you. I think if I offered to row over the Atlantic, you're the type of person that would say, okay, I'll take the first ship. But all kidding aside, I mean, you just mentioned a lot of programs that are carried out by the library, and I was hoping you were going to tell me that commission might offer millions of dollars to purchase and/or operate such a facility, because if you think about it, you've got the elderly people across the street, you've got Massasoit Community College, you're located at an intersection where people would come in from Whitman, Abington, Halifax, who knows where. It is a very large facility, it does have parking, and you could sell the East Side Library, and if you were to do this, and then have that facility. But, so I guess my question to you is simple. Would you just check and see is it still an 8 to 10 year wait, and what type of money would be available, if anything? And
Absolutely.
Feel free to kick my hallucination around with the trustees or anyone else, I don't mind.
I absolutely love it. I have a proposal for a continuing center for education anyway in my strategic plan, so.
Maybe we're both crazy.
We're both crazy, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. But I will, and I'll follow up with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other councilors? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Director.
Thank you, sir. You guys have a great evening. Thank you, Troy.
Next department is the Conservation Commission. Invited Joyce Voorhees, chairperson.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening. Hello.
Anything you'd like to say or questions?
I assume everyone has had a chance to take a look at the budget parts.
Councilor Minicello.
I would just like to say, yes, I have looked at the budget and find everything in order, but I just want to point out how much you work and how hard you and your board work. You put in so many hours. It is a very complicated board in terms of the material and the issues that you cover. I just want to say thank you for the time that you put in. The city is getting a bargain with all of you.
Well, thank you very much. And we appreciate very much the fact that you supported the ordinance, too, that went through, which was one of the budget items that increased a little bit. I do have the distinct pleasure, however, if you don't mind, I don't know if you've met Kyle Holden. Kyle Holden is the new conservation agent. And Councilor Farwell, I know you said something about being very careful to vet, for good employees. Whoever has vetted this employee has done a wonderful job, really. I'm very happy to work with him.
Well, thank you.
Welcome to your first budget.
Thank you.
Both of you, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
No, thank you. You do
Any
fantastic. We do have one more council, but the boards, conservation, zoning, and planning have done really great, and we're really appreciative of all your work. Councilor Farwell?
Well, thanks to Kyle. He sent me some light reading material recently, which I went through, and the chair and I go back probably 35 years, and you can see she's fine, and you look what happened to me. So, thank you, Joyce, for being part of city government. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. It's
Thank
been
you,
a pleasure, really.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any other councilors, so, Councilor Mendez.
Hi. Would you be able to just tell us about your consultants? What is that for? Because you're asking for $60,000. Do you want to?
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
Part of it is that there's some stormwater evaluation that has to be done for the Wetlands Protection Act, and that has to be reviewed by peer reviewers, a Beta Consulting Group. And also Beta has come on board for some additional services while Kyle is getting to know the ropes. And so it really is consultant services for those.
Thank you so much and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
good to have you here.
Thank you, Councilor. Seeing no other councilors, thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you.
Good night.
The next department is the Planning Board. Invited Tony Goncalves, chairperson.
Madam Chair, I think you got your hair cut.
Good evening, Council. My name is James Robert Sweeney. I'm stepping in for the chairwoman.
Good evening, Mr. Sweeney. Councilors, questions for Mr. Sweeney? No Councilor Minicello.
I'll just say the same thing. I've been before this board, very professional. They put in a ton of time, and all of the members of that board are basically serving at a personal loss in terms of what they have to put in. So I appreciate personally what you guys and gals do. You do a phenomenal board,
Thank you.
We do appreciate the work of the planning board, and Mr. Sweeney, yourself, you're on planning, zoning, traffic,
Everything.
and you're
Troutbrook also.
Troutbrook, and you're one of our leading digital ambassadors.
Thank you.
We do appreciate your efforts. Any other counselor? All right, Mr. Sweeney, you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next department is the Planning and Economic Development Department. Invited Rob May, director.
Mr. Director. Oh, never mind. Good evening, Mr. Director.
Good evening, sir. You may have seen this at your seat this evening. It's an example of what we are doing now to really step up our game in economic development. Inside this folder, you'll find on the right-hand side some information that is produced by our retail recruitment team, retail coach. They are out there looking for prospective tenants to move into the city of Brockton. We're looking at all areas of the city. We'll have profiles for all the major shopping districts in the community and have information about the market demographics and psychographics that make up that market and how that matches with very specific retailers, restaurants, hoteliers, and we'll be able to go on after those. On the left-hand side, just an example of now that we have digitized our building permit process with CitizenServe, we're able to export information about the building permits. This image shows the level of commercial, industrial, and then multifamily residential development. The size of the marker is relative to the amount of money that the investor says that the project is worth based on their building permit application. So it's probably higher than that, but hey, but I do want to point out that there's development happening in every single ward across the city. We have a map that shows a little bit more about downtown development, which we will be converting into a more appropriate pamphlet. This is kind of the draft. There's also information about industrial sector analysis, or economic base analysis, and it identifies the industries that are strong in Brockton, and one of those that pops out really strong is the food manufacturing business. And so the last 2 pages show information about marketing that we're doing to the food industry. And the last page is actually a copy of our first ad for sponsorship. We went to the local food manufacturers show, and we'll be playing a larger role in that, trying to find growing manufacturing firms to come into the city. These are smaller firms. They're not as big as Cindy's Kitchen or Concord Foods, but they will grow into those in the future. So we're really pleased with being able to do this. We're also updating our webpage for the economic development webpage. And as you can see from our budget statement and mission, we have a lot of accomplishments last year. We expect an even stronger 2024. We have projects, as I said, going on in every ward, and we're very much involved more in marketing for business attraction. Some of the major projects that we're working on right now are in the Campello neighborhood, where we're doing a study around the Campello train station and how to create a more walkable community, a village really around the train station. We propose to do the same thing in Montello next year. We've asked the state for funding, and God willing, we'll be able to get those funds and continue supporting that activity there. And we'll also be continuing with the Lovett Brook Urban Renewal Plan, which is the area around Good Samaritan Hospital. Our budget this year, we have not added any new employees or positions. And you can see that on 335, page 335, there's a breakdown of the personnel services. And then lastly, our main budget is on page 337. It's fairly evenly funded. There are some, it looks like there's been some increases, but I want to, and this is no slight for Troy, the adopted budget last year, we had requested $300,000. It was reduced to $125,000. So in that column, the approved budget is $125,000. We were able to get, with your permission, $175,000 put back in there. So we're actually looking at $300,000. So there's a slight decrease in our budget this year, but it's still a strong budget for us to be able to move forward and continue growth here in the city. So with that, I will shut up and look forward to your questions.
Fair enough. Councilors? Councilman Minichiello.
Hello, good evening. Could you just tell us what the increase is with regard to consultants?
There is a slight increase with regards to consultants. We use outside professional services on a regular basis. We are able to use our staff and leverage those dollars by our staff managing outside consultants to do specific projects that we bring on. For example, the urban renewal plan in Lovett Brook in Ward 1. We'll be using consultants to both provide the graphics and textual development, work with us through all the community meetings, and we have the same thing going on in downtown and in the Campello neighborhood. So what we're seeing there is our ability to both leverage state grants. You'll see we will pay some match funding for some grants, and that usually comes out of our consulting line in addition.
Thank you. With regard to the project that you just mentioned, please don't hesitate to, ask me, or if you need any assistance or help, I would love to participate.
I will be asking you to be on the, you and Councilor Asak to be on the team.
That would be great. And
we have counselors working on teams on just about every project.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. May, just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
You have a part-time position listed here for $10,000.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't kind of label anybody as a part-time employee. Could you just tell us what that is for?
That is Ms. Pam Gurley, who had retired. She is assisting us in grants management. It's a very complicated and cumbersome deal to track the grants, report the expenditures, create the reports to the state or the federal government. And so she comes in on an hourly basis and manages that with me.
So she's no longer being paid as a consultant, right?
No, she's not.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors? Director, you've set a record. You're free to go.
Thank you. And thank you, Troy, for all your assistance.
You are welcome. Nice job.
The next department is the Auditor's Office. Invited Karen Preval, City Auditor.
Good evening, Madam Auditor.
Mr. Chairman and City Council members. Thank you for allowing me to present the FY24 budget for the auditing department. I'm happy to share that our mission in the auditing department is to protect the fiduciary interests of the city by providing oversight of all the city's finances and ensuring that transactions are processed legally, efficiently, in accordance to Mass General law. In addition, we also manage the mail and the telephone budget. I'd like to really thank my staff for the hard work, the countless hours that they put in their tremendous attention and diligence to detail. I especially wanted to thank who's here today, our Assistant City Auditor, Irene Giannopoulos, who's sitting here, for her dedication, her extremely hard work, and her effort to really allow our department to continue and move forward with some really important and critical initiatives. The auditing department was able to function for the first half of the fiscal year with 5 vacancies, and I'm really pleased to share that we now are almost fully staffed and have been able to manage the weather, the storm, while protecting the city's fiduciary's interests. We have several goals moving forward for FY24, looking at transparency through CareerGov, which is the city's online checkbook platform, and continuing to modernize all of our financial systems through automation. I welcome any questions.
Councilors, questions for the auditor? Councilor D'Agostino.
We talked about this recently with the postage and mail costs, and being a bit over where budgeted. Obviously, I see your request is for about 86% more. Is there some reason that these costs are going up so substantially? I mean, is there just more volume?
So this year, Counselor, we have had a lot of different mailings. Some are through different letters that are going out to different residents for stormwater. We had a lot of petitions for streets. We had different mailings that went out through the Board of Health. So there were a lot of different mailings that have gone out. It seems like it's higher than previous years, so I wanted to make sure, going into the FY24 budget, that we had sufficient funds to, weather whatever increase we may have. A couple of things that we're doing, we currently use Pitney Bowes as our vendor for our actual mail machine, and that mail machine now is going to reflect and be able to check, account for the departments that are actually doing the mailings, because we provide mail service for the entire city. But a lot of it's just due to a lot of mailings and, things that are going out to the public.
I can supplement, Counselor, and add to what Karen said, that a large part of the increase in cost, and correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, also when people vote by mail, they get mailed things from the city, and those costs are actually borne in this budget. Okay. And I don't know the exact figures, but I know there's a substantial amount of folks that in the elections in the past couple of years have voted by mail, and that's a large part of these costs as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions for the auditor? Counselor Rodriguez.
And of course, the price for stamps, I guess, have gone up as well, right? Because I know they're $1 yet? It's getting pretty close. Well, thank you, ma'am, for showing up and coming to our infamous budget hearings. You've got a couple positions open in your book.
Yes.
Are there any plans to fill these anytime soon, or?
Yes, we filled one vacancy, which was the administrative assistant that works on payroll. That was filled about a month ago. And the other position that I have is a compliance quality technical control administrator. That was just recently posted, so I'm hoping to fill that position at least within the month.
Is that grade level 2?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions for the auditor? Under auditing? Nope. All right, Madam Clerk. For the next.
Next will be Auditor Mailroom, invited Karen Praval, City Auditor.
Good evening, Madam Auditor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
I think we kind of hit the mail already, but questions on the mailroom? Seeing none. Madam Clerk.
Auditor Telephone.
Good evening, Madam Auditor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
I keep doing this. Questions on the telephone? All right, seeing none. Madam Clerk.
Okay, Retirement, Non-Contributory, invited Karen Praval, City Auditor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, Madam Auditor. Questions on retirement? I have some, mostly just about my own. Seeing none. Thank you, Madam Auditor. I think that about covers it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job. Thank you.
Last department is the Finance Department, invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Mr. CFO.
Good evening, Counselor. Good evening, Madam Chairman.
Good evening.
It's been my pleasure to be with you these last 3 nights, and of course I'll be here tomorrow night as well. This is my 5th budget as your CFO, and I really appreciate this process. As you know, I've been working in local government for quite a long time, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to have a meaningful and substantive dialogue. I think that's good government, and I appreciate the work that you all have done and actually looking through these 400 pages and coming up with questions. I I did give a shout out to Tiffany Casulo, the budget director, the other night. I want to do that again. She leads a team of really dedicated folks who, in addition to working on this budget and then monitoring the expenses throughout the year, work on a whole host of other activities supporting the city, including taking on the issue of grant writing, and just in the last year, through our bipartisan infrastructure committee that we established and coordinate with Chief of Staff Sidney Marrow, Pat Hill, and Rob May, we've already received more than $2 million in grants from that work. So that's really important. I wanted to highlight a few things for you before I open up for questions. As I mentioned the other night in my introductory remarks, this budget is our fourth budget that I believe is worthy of the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award. And that's not just so that we have a nice plaque in the office. It demonstrates this city's commitment to transparency. And we're one of very few communities in Massachusetts that take the time and make the effort to have a budget that is compliant with those standards and the public benefits as well, because we get to tell our story in a way that the public can appreciate and understand. I would like to make one comment on the document itself. I did get some feedback from Councilor Azak and some others. I want to make a clarification. As part of the GFOA requirements, our financial policies are in this document. As you know, we passed, the mayor promulgated for the first time ever in the city of Brockton, formal financial policies a little over a year ago. Those policies in total are a part of this document. Within those financial policies are the city's pay plan that you voted. If you look at the pay plan in the policies, the pay plan as it existed at the time that the policies were voted, that does not reflect what the pay plan is now. When those policies are updated, of course, the updated pay plan will be included, but I was grateful that Councilor Razak raised that because it could potentially cause some confusion if you look at it. In addition to the work on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Committee and pursuing grants, our office also coordinates closely with the mayor's office in overseeing the expense of more than $50 million in ARPA funds. We would love to come back, the mayor and I, on a resolve soon and give you an update on those projects. We meet regularly with Dan Pallotta, our ARPA project manager. Several of those projects are either out to bid, contract has been awarded, or are ready to go out to bid. So this summer, you will see construction in this building and at the War Memorial and expanding the senior center, at the Cosgrove Pool, and parks and playgrounds in every ward in the city. So it'll be one of the busiest, and that's in addition to the public safety building and the other stuff that we're engaged in. So it'll be probably one of the busiest summers in terms of public investment that this city has ever seen. In this budget, there are 3 new positions proposed. We've spoken about them over the last 3 nights, but I will highlight them again for you. As the mayor has mentioned to you many times, we are proposing together 2 grant writer positions. We anticipate when you look at the revenue that those will be wholly funded through grant revenue. So when you receive grants, many of them have an administrative component to them where you can, as part of the grant, receive administrative funding. So we have proposed to receive approximately $300,000 in grant funding to support these 2 grant positions. So we do hope that they will pay for themselves. We have filed or will file before the deadline for your next meeting an ordinance change to the pay plan to add those positions in. And so the salaries reflect existing positions in the pay plan consistent with the financial analysts. And then, of course, the business manager we spoke about quite a bit last night. That funding exists already in the water and sewer department. Our proposal is to take a position that was vacated and rework it to have overall financial responsibility for both the general fund and the enterprise activities in the Department of Public Works. I know you have some interest in consultants. I did provide to Councilor Rodriguez an overview of consultants in the city in general. Our consultant line is higher than many in the city, and that's because our office, from time to time, provides support to a wide varieties of activities throughout the city, and we hire consultants on behalf of other departments. Our spending to date is a little over $100,000, and those activities have been varied to a consultant that the city has had for many, many, many years that assists us with our Medicaid collections and the reimbursements there, to a consultant who helps us putting this budget book together, to CNC advisors who help us with our self-funded insurance program. Just today, we received bids for our reinsurance, which keeps our rates low by insuring our own health insurance and guards against high-cost claims, to a consultant that helps us drive our ARPA funds towards minority and women-owned businesses. So our work with a wide variety of consultants is pretty varied throughout the city. And finally, I did want to note, in response to an inquiry from Councilor Minicello and others, Councilor D'Agostino, we, a little over a year ago, engaged through our existing energy services contract with Amoresco, engaged them to provide consultant services to us, for us, that goes out and actually manages, looks at the commodities of electric and gas, and purchases contracts on a rolling basis for us to try to get the best deal we can for energy. And I offer you that in response to some of the electricity budgets that are proposed for next year. I asked those folks at Amoresco to give us a detailed report on the current status of those contracts, what the duration is, what our commodity prices are for both gas and electric. They responded that they will gladly do that. I forwarded that email to all of you today. As soon as I receive that report, I will gladly provide it to you, because I think it demonstrates we're doing our best to try to get the best price. But as I mentioned to the councilor just a couple hours ago, always willing to try to improve on that and look for ways that we can improve and get even better costs. So I think that's a pretty good overview of the status of our department. I am happy, as always, to answer any questions.
Councilors? Questions? Councilor Rodriguez.
Well, somebody's got to ask you a question. Troy, if you could just, Mr. Clarkson, Mr. CFO, you've got a part-time salary on your book. Can you just kind of tell us what that is for?
For sure. Yes. We originally established that part-time salary line several years ago when I first came. As you know, for a time we engaged my predecessor, Jay Condon, who helped out with a wide variety of activities. He was instrumental in helping out with the pension obligation bond. We haven't used Jay in a while. He's still very much, we stay in touch with him, and he's a good friend. He serves the city honorably on the retirement board, but we haven't used him that much, so we did propose to reduce that line by more than half for next year. I would like to maintain that because we do also bring on summer interns, and so that's the source of those funds now. We're actually interviewing a young gentleman tomorrow and hope to bring on a few interns. We've had real success with that in the past. In fact, one of our employees, who now works for the school department, but Sarah Butler, who was an exemplary employee for us, began as a summer intern.
And right below the consultants, you've got other contract services. What is that for?
So that generally acts similar to the consultants. So a wide variety of potential services for us if things don't generally fall into the consultant line. That's another line that we can use to obtain services. I'll tell you what we've used in that line though so far this year. I can certainly give you a printout of how much we've spent. We've only spent about $2,900 in that line thus far this year.
I saw the line that says signing bonus. It has nothing on it, but I saw it as singing bonus. And I thought we were actually paying you to sing, so I was a little worried there. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
You know what, if you deem that that was necessary, Counselor, I'd probably do it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam.
Counselor Texera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. CFO. Just a question, out-of-state travel. We went from $5,000 F-23 to F-24, jumped to $15,000.
That is, Counselor, a substantial increase, similar to what we discussed with the mayor's budget the other night. He and I have had a pretty robust schedule of acting as ambassadors for the city, and so we have traveled to Washington, D.C. a couple of times with what I would submit are amazing results in bringing money back. We traveled, as I mentioned the other night, to Greenville, South Carolina, to try to understand best practices in downtown revitalization. We traveled with the delegation from Bridgewater State University to Cape Verde, and so I do anticipate in the next year that program of reaching out and engaging with other communities, with other nations, will continue. And I think it's had some very positive and tangible results, and so that's the request for that increase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Someone else? Okay. I have a few questions, Mr. Clarkson. Under your FY23 accomplishments, first one is procure the services of 2 house doctors.
Yes.
Why were you using house doctors?
So that's a great question, Madam Chairman. That's a term that describes on-call consultants, and those are engineers, architects. The costs for these, by the way, are borne through with our ARPA funds. But the house doctors, rather than, let's say, for the parks and playgrounds, going out and procuring a designer to do just design a few parks, we went out and procured professionals, consultants, again, architects, engineers, that would be on call for any wide variety of projects related to all of the construction that we have. So it was designed to have consultants at the ready that would be available, and far more efficient to do it this way rather than separately procure design and construction professionals for every project.
Okay. And then your last accomplishment, coordinated on receiving a second cybersecurity awareness grant to train staff on cyber threats. So how is that being translated? Are you going to train us?
Most certainly, yes, yeah. So the Commonwealth, and I think, I'm not certain on this, but I'll double check, because you all have Brockton email addresses, you should be receiving emails from the Commonwealth about ongoing cyber training. Okay. As an aside, this isn't related to that, but I will tell you, because it's tangential for sure, and it's very exciting. I had breakfast this morning with a representative from Bridgewater State University, and they've received over $20 million in funding from the state to actually build a cyber security training facility on the campus that will act like a flight simulator for airline pilots, for fighter pilots. They're going to have a cybersecurity training facility that will train future cybersecurity workers on how to recognize and mitigate cybersecurity threats. So it's a growing industry, and there's a very concerted effort here in the area to be able to provide training and then access to employment for people in Bridgewater's service area, which of course includes Brockton. So it's very exciting.
Okay, thank you. And then, let me see. Last year, we talked about the amount of free cash being used to balance the budget, which last year was about 15 million. Are we doing the same this year?
No. This year, first of all, we developed much more free cash than we typically do. The amount of free cash was over $23 million. And that is a huge credit to Karen Praval and her team, and Tiff and our team for finishing up the year and making sure that our spending stayed in check, because free cash comes from budgeted funds that are unspent and revenues received in excess of projections. So all of the things I've been talking about for the last 3 nights feed into our free cash, and so we were able to develop much more free cash than normal. As a result of that, and as a result of some of the pressures that I've mentioned about funding the public safety building within the operating budget, we did increase the amount of free cash used to balance this budget up to $19 million. But because we had more free cash than normal, we were able to set aside, as I mentioned last night, more than $3 million in free cash still available that we did not use to balance the budget, that I will be back to you in several weeks to ask you to use to fund a capital plan.
Thank you. That's it for me. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you all very much.
Don. Well, at this time, I'd like to let the public know that tomorrow night we will be hearing from the public at 6 o'clock until 6:30. We invite you to sign up outside of the door when you get here. It'll be a 2-minute limit on comments, but we are eager to hear from the public. And then at 6:30, we will be resuming our Finance Committee meetings, and at 7, a special City Council meeting.
Just 7 o'clock, Council.
Council meeting, okay. Anyone have anything to add? Thank you, then this meeting is adjourned.